Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories, where today, my Karen wife demanded I pay for her friend's bill at dinner. I, 24 male, and my wife, who's 24 female, are a newlywed couple. My wife has 4 friends who she has been really close with since high school. For a celebration, my wife decided to go to an expensive steakhouse. The day comes and we go in separate cars there. We all eat and my wife slides the bill, $700 plus, and proceeds to say, "The man should always pay for the wife and her friends." I laugh awkwardly and ask her why. She says, because I'm the man. I tell her that the only other person I would be paying for would be you and me. Her friends proceeded to laugh at me, calling me a broke husband. I stand up and I put 2 $100 bills there for my wife and I's food, and I leave. My wife gets home and she starts screaming at me, saying that I made her feel embarrassed, how she promised her friends I'd pay, and that her friends made fun of her on the ride home for marrying a man who can't even pay the bill. I decided to pack a bag and head to my friend's house. I told my parents and my friends, and they say that I should have just paid it. Now I'm having second thoughts if I overreacted. Am I the jerk? Edit. I've read some comments asking if my wife has ever acted like this before, and no, she hasn't. That's why I just laughed awkwardly. The only other time she did this was when I didn't pay for her mom's food, which happened when we first started dating, and it was the first time she ever screamed at me like that. Instead of escalating it, I just left. And when we do argue, it's not a screaming match. For how long we've dated, I've known her since freshman year of high school, and we got together junior year. We've been together for over 8 years. I read some comments and decided to talk to her tomorrow about what happened, why she did that, etc. I do recognize that I didn't pay the full amount of me and my wife's food. I do take fault for that. I should have added another $50 to $75 to make it the price of 2 people. For the people who say I forgot to tip, I go there regularly with my coworkers. We each pay for our own plate, and I always leave a good tip. Not the jerk. Your wife should have talked to you about it before telling her friends that you'd pay, not assume. Dude, everyone in this scenario is a jerk except for you. Wow, the audacity to just casually push over $700 bill and then say, "Well, the man should always pay for his wife and her friends." It sounds to me like your wife doesn't want a spouse. She wants a sugar daddy who will treat her and her friends, and when you pushed back, she blew up in an attempt to manipulate the situation in her favor by playing on your emotions. "You embarrassed me." Your family and friends must think that emotional and financial mistreatment, guilting you and trying to force you to pay for her and her friends' food with no prior warning, is cool. Get better friends and seek marriage counseling or a divorce if this is frequent behavior. Not the jerk in the slightest. Not the jerk. The man is supposed to pay, huh? Yeah, we used to be proud to do things like that. But that was back when we were the heads of the households and we were able to lead our families the way God instructed us to. These days, at least here in America, attempting to lead your family down a righteous path will only result in you divorced, paying alimony, child support, and endless therapy bills for your kids. Well, who do you think is the jerk? Opie or his wife? Please let us know. Just when I start gaining a bit of faith in humanity, these stories make me lose it again. Am I the jerk for refusing to give my son's free room to my cousin who's living with us? Me, 36 male, and my partner, 38 male, have 2 kids, Luke, who's 18, and Jay, who's 15. Some background info. We took the boys under our care when they were 8 and 11. Before they came with us, they had been in different families and group homes for over a year. It was hard for Luke to understand that they were with us for good and that he had his own room and family. Me and my partner knew that he still sometimes has insecurities about it, and a recent one was about him leaving for college. We explained to Luke that even if he was 18 and leaving the house, he would still have a room and a place at home, be it now or in 10 to 25 years. That he would still be our kid even when he's 40, and we will always be here for him. Now the issue. My cousin, who's 42, recently broke up and needed somewhere to live for her 2 boys, who are 16 and 12. Me and my partner have a house that's big enough, and we agreed to host them free of charge for 6 months until she gets her bearings back. For the house, me and my partner have a kind of master bedroom with our bedroom, bathroom, and office. Our boys have their own room, and they share a bathroom, and my cousin's boys have the guest room with a bathroom. My cousin has a room on the ground floor. It's not big, but she has a space for her bed, a desk, and a wardrobe. Last week, we got the keys for Luke's flat, and we started the process of furnishing it. He will officially move in next week and will start uni the week after. This weekend, my cousin asked when Luke's room will be empty. I told her that it will not be, that he will only take his clothes, books, decorative items. Basically, his room will stay the same, and he will only take what he needs. She then asked how she will be able to move in the room with all his stuff still there. I told her that she won't, that it will still be his room. He will still come home on some weekends and holidays. She then complained about the fact that she was living in a storage room, that she was the only one without her own bathroom, and that it was unfair of us to have an empty bedroom in our house and not give it to her. Me and my partner were very firm in our decision, but my mom and aunt called me and told me that it was a bit unfair of us to not offer proper accommodation for my cousin, and that Luke could do without a room for a few months now that he has his flat for the school year. I disagree. For me, it's more than a bedroom. It's what it represents. It's his own place for him in our home, and it's something I want him to have for as long as possible. I've been called selfish and that I was coddling him too much over this, so I would like outsider perspective. Not the jerk. You're a better man than I. As soon as she started involving other family members, I would have told her to pack her crap up and get out of my house. The boys would be welcome to stay if she chooses. They didn't do anything wrong, but mom's gotta go. You have been more than accommodating. Not the jerk. Your cousin is being ungrateful and entitled. She's getting a place for her and her kids rent-free for 6 months. It's much more important for your son to keep his room than for her to have a big room. She can have the big room when she's paying for it. Shut down this conversation once and for all. You didn't promise this room to her, and make sure she knows that. Well, what do you think? Should Opie let his cousin have the room or not? Please let us know. Life tip: never let anyone move in with you, family or not. I've just told my wife, who scares me, that I want a divorce. I'm not sure how I let it get this bad. I, 40 male, just told my wife, who's 43, this week that I want a divorce, and I'm buzzing with pride and happiness. We've been together 12 years and have 2 sons who are 6 and 2. When we met, all was well. We had jobs in the same industry and we traveled a lot. But very quickly, it became clear that my wife doesn't have any tolerance or even understanding for things that are not done the way she wants them to be. She idolizes her childhood and is very close to her mother and sister. Admittedly, she grew up in a very close, large family and had a pretty great childhood. But as an adult, this has morphed into a fanaticism with things being done normally. To her, normally means the way she would do them or how her mother did them. Ironically, her mom is super chill and not at all like her. Over the years, this annoyed me, but it became way worse once our kids were born. Everything had to be done as she wanted it in the house. I couldn't choose how to dress them because I didn't pick the right blend of colors. If I packed lunch and snacks for school, she would change the snacks to the ones that she wanted. That was still the short end of the wedge. The major issue is I wake up early in the morning, 5:30 a.m. I always have and I love it. I also do fine at night on little sleep, whereas my wife is a demon if she doesn't get 8 hours. That means that I take care of 99% of kids waking up at night. I do 99% of morning prep, lunch boxes, breakfast, getting dressed, for which she chooses the clothes the night before. I always take the kids to school. Another reason I do this early is that if I do it when she's awake, I get criticized for using the wrong spoon to serve the food, or using the wrong milk for oatmeal, or not cleaning up every tiny spill the second it happens, or using the wrong dish rag, etc. Every criticism is exasperated and aggressive. She's right on some of them, but it's a constant barrage, so I tune her out. I've even been told going to the bathroom is a problem because they feel me being awake. The issue is that our oldest loves to wake up early with me. It's a really cool time for us. We have breakfast, we watch the news, we talk about nerdy stuff. But she won't have it. She insists he has to stay in bed until 6:30. I wouldn't mind, but it's hard for him. He hates it. He cries and moans and whines and just wants to be up and about. I'm exactly the same. Now that our second is doing the same, she has begun blowing up at me aggressively. The other day, she woke up at 6 and accused me of just putting them in front of the TV in the morning, and that our eldest is short because he doesn't sleep enough. They get 1 hour of TV during the holidays, and I come up with the vast majority of outing ideas. He's quite short for his age group, but nothing out of the ordinary. And I finally snapped. I was getting yelled at again in front of both of the kids. I just said enough. I calmly said I wanted a divorce and that she would never speak to me like that again. We're away from the house until next week, but I already contacted a lawyer. I'm so happy. It will suck in the short term and then be such a relief. I can't wait to have my own place and the kids on my own half of the time. Her response: so this happened while we were on holiday at her family's in Portugal. Because we're here and she's surrounded by her people, she hasn't blown up yet. She's been distant. We're sleeping in different rooms, but nothing major. When we go home next week and she realizes I'm committed to what I'm doing, oh boy, it's gonna Krakatoa for sure. Prior discussions in counseling. A lot of people are asking about this. I did try to confront her about her behavior. I tried calmly when I was feeling good to explain to her how I felt. She literally told me, "My issues are more important than yours." I tried angrily when I had enough. It turned into a war of words. I tried sadly when I was at my wit's end. She didn't care. Therapy. We went to therapy a few times together and each wrote a list of things for the other to work on. She wanted me to learn how to cook and work out. I now do 70% of the cooking since 2 years, and I play paddle 3 to 4 times a week. I asked her to learn to compromise and tidy the house more. None of that ever happened. She always said she had no time to tidy because of her job and the 2 kids. Funny how I found the time. I also went to therapy alone and worked a lot on building up my confidence, standing up for myself, and setting boundaries. I'm sorry, Opie, but let me tell you, as someone who came from a dysfunctional family with a mother that went off on my dad for more than 30 years, I wished my parents had divorced sooner. It's better to have 2 separate parents, but with good co-parenting skills, than 2 living together in a house like this. I walked on eggshells with my mother, and soon enough, my brother became the same narcissistic image of her. Am I the jerk for wanting to keep an expensive birthday gift that makes my boyfriend uncomfortable? I, female, just turned 25, have a friend, Logan, who's 25, and we've been friends since we were 7 to 8 years old. I have a boyfriend, Matt, who I've been dating for 7 months. My birthday was last week, and I had a dinner party for some friends before we all went out to a club. There were 8 of us, including Logan and Matt. We had a little bit of a gift opening before dessert, and Logan gifted me an old copy of The Great Gatsby. The book has a special significance to us because for many years, Logan and I lived in different countries. We kept in contact, but we didn't see each other in person for about 4 years. We finally got our parents to agree for me to fly to his country to visit in 2013. We were talking about what we were going to do on the visit, and I really wanted to go and see The Great Gatsby movie, which had just come out, as it's my favorite book. Logan had never even heard of it, and I said he had to read it before we went to see the movie. Logan was never academic, and to this day, it's the only fiction book he's ever read all the way through. Whenever I ask him to do me a favor, he always replies with, "I read The Great Gatsby for you, so I may as well," and it's a running joke. We always go big on birthdays, but this book means so much to me. The day after, Matt said he felt the book was an inappropriate gift because of how expensive it is. I tried to explain to him that it's just a sentimental gift and that the cost isn't the point, but Matt said he feels weird that another man gifted me something that costs more than his car. This argument went on for a long time, and Matt said that he thinks I should return the book, and if it means so much to both of us, then Logan can keep it. I told him to grow up. We've been having this fight on and off for a week. Matt's saying that it's reasonable for him to be uncomfortable, but I think he's just being a jealous kid. It's not like Logan gave me a great diamond necklace just to show off. He gave me something heartfelt that means the world to me, and I think that should be more important than the fact that Matt thinks it's outside what he deems as an acceptable budget. My mother is saying to give Matt the benefit of the doubt and maybe ask Logan to keep the book for now, and if one day Matt is more secure, I can take it back. My dad is saying Matt's an idiot. My girlfriends are split. This argument is just dragging on, and I'm leaving for my birthday trip tomorrow, and I just need some perspective on whether I'm being unreasonable wanting to keep the book. Edit. For everyone asking about the book, it's a 1925 edition, well known to be fairly rare. For everyone asking why I'm not dating Logan, or why I never did, I explained this in detail in several comments, but this is the most comprehensive and reflective answer. It's not that I don't absolutely adore Logan, I do. He's my favorite person in the whole world. But if you ask me why I'm not in a relationship with him, I don't have a concrete answer, because there's nothing about him I don't like, but it just never happened, and I think he would say the same thing. When I think of the way he was with his ex and the ones I've had, including Matt, I don't see us being that way or those people for each other. Update. So Matt and I broke up. He didn't end up coming on my birthday trip, but we were kind of talking on and off, and he sent me a text that dropped the L-bomb, and I didn't respond in kind. That was the last straw for him. Now that I think about it, that was the next hurdle that was coming. This just brought it forward, I guess. He'll be picking his things up over the weekend. I would like us to stay friends. I still like him so much, but I know that's not really up to me now. I told my mom about the breakup, and she apologized for making me feel like I was in the wrong about keeping the book. She said she was just so used to seeing me treat men as disposable, and because I had been with Matt so long, she thought maybe he might not be, and she got too caught up in that. I think hearing that I wasn't even ready to say I love him was a shock to her, and she realized she had been telling herself a story about him and me that wasn't what was playing out. On to me and Logan. Obviously, a whole wealth of opinions and advice was shared about our friendship, and honestly, going through the comments on the post was the first time I'd really ever thought that deeply about it. It brought up a lot of memories and feelings, and I did end up talking to Logan about it and telling him about the original post. I ended up making a note of some of the people's questions and asking him. I really wish I could include all of his answers here because I think his responses were pretty funny. Logan did not buy the book as a way to express romantic interest, and the plot was not relevant to his choice to purchase it. Logan has never wanted to date me. Feelings are complicated. I think that's everything. Thank you to everyone who responded. I laughed, I cried, I had an existential crisis. It was a wild ride. I feel like some context is missing that was in OP's comments. She and Logan are rich. Matt is middle class. The book is a 1925 copy with paperwork, and she considers it the same amount as spending money on an upscale restaurant or buying a car. She wouldn't answer comments about if Logan asked her out if she would date him after the initial shock, citing that she could speculate all she wanted, but it wouldn't matter because he wasn't going to ask her, though she very much denied they had feelings for each other and that Logan wouldn't confess after all these years. She's moved cities and followed Logan to college, including annoying her dad into driving 5 hours to support him at a career event. She and Logan also bonded heavily after both their partners divorced, and Logan was previously in a 4-year-long relationship that didn't work out. OP felt Matt was being too controlling over this event, and that if she conceded to this, Matt would ask her to give up other things or ask her to stop hanging out with Logan. She doesn't think Matt needs to trust Logan as long as he can trust her. She also answered comments asking if her relationship with Logan was normal for friendship, with very mixed responses, and did admit she could get behind the idea of her and Logan being codependent. And Logan also regularly pays for her to go on vacation. She also said she couldn't imagine her and Logan dating since they already knew everything about each other, and she viewed dating as getting to know someone. She said she didn't know what they would talk about on dates, but never admitted if she wanted to date Logan or not if he asked. Also, Matt is the first boyfriend she's had long enough to celebrate her birthday with, and Logan is somewhat territorial. I believe she also mentioned how even though it wasn't a competition, she's known Logan longer, and therefore he would always be more important and special, whereas boyfriends come and go, and she would feel the same about any partner with a childhood best friend. That kind of blew my mind a bit. Her mom is 100% right in that she treats men as disposable. She flat out says she does by admitting what you said. To each their own, but I absolutely would not want to be with someone who's always going to consider me second to someone else, and whose idea of partnership isn't, we're in this together, but, oh well, partnerships come and go. She should stick to casual dating if that's going to be her attitude. Yeah, she dated Matt for 7 months, but still didn't feel all that attached to him. 7 months, and she still wasn't ready to even say she loved him. But the guy he doesn't have to worry about is like a sweater that's amazing and beautiful and perfect, but she just doesn't wear. Jeez. Well, who do you think is the jerk? Opie or her boyfriend? Please let us know. Love triangles, not even once. Am I the jerk for telling my sister that she knew what she was getting into when she settled for my cast-off ex? If you had told me years ago that I would be in this situation, I would have laughed, but here we go. My boyfriend suggested that I get an outside perspective here. I, 26 female, was dating James, male 26, for most of college, and we had plans to get engaged after graduation. 2 months before graduation, I caught him planning to cheat. Nothing physical seemed to have happened yet, but he and another girl were making plans for a weekend that he told me he was going for a quick visit home. Cheating is an instant deal breaker to me, so it was over. Instead of having a fight, I didn't say anything, just waited till after he left for home, texted him proof that I had caught him, and good thing you're single now, have fun, then blocked him on everything and went for a girls' weekend with friends. James lost his mind and spent a month trying to get in contact with me or guilt friends into helping him. The few messages that got through, I trashed without even reading them. After a while, I thought he had finally given up. About a year later, my sister, 24 female, announces she wants to bring her boyfriend home to meet the family. We didn't realize she had a boyfriend, but my parents had a barbecue and told her to bring him. It was James. My parents were stunned but tried to pull it together. I just left. My sister called and tried to explain later that they had met at a party on campus and it was no big deal since I broke up with him. I told her I thought she could do better, but she could make her own mistakes. I just wouldn't be spending time around them. She got mad about it because our parents took my side. I don't get along with my sister at the best of times, so avoiding them wasn't hard except on holidays. My parents caved and let him come to Thanksgiving and Christmas since they seemed serious. James seemed way too invested in getting back on my good side when he was around, and it apparently made my sister jealous because she started acting brattier than normal. This last weekend was a milestone birthday for my mom, and I thought it would be a good chance to introduce them to my boyfriend, Todd, who's 29. Mom gave it the okay, and Todd actually made a great impression on the family. James was there with my sister, and he was upset and left early. My sister called me later and yelled at me for upsetting James and trying to make him jealous to get his attention. I told her that she knew she was getting a cheat when she decided to date him, and he was no longer my problem. Since then, she's blown up social media, venting about it, and is refusing to see my parents for the holidays if Todd and I are there. My parents think she's over the top and acting out, but she's on their case so much they want to try and smooth it over and me apologize for what I said. But I think it was an apt description. Not the jerk. You can choose your friends and your boyfriends, but you can't choose your family. The sister and James are a perfect match for each other. Not the jerk. It almost appears that James is dating your sister to get back at you, and she is blissfully ignorant of that fact. Not the jerk. Your sister refuses to accept that not only did she get your cast off, he's also not worth the drama and issues this has brought to the family. If she's angry at you instead of him because he got jealous, then she's being ridiculous, and apologizing for it isn't going to make her see sense. Am I the jerk for buying my grandparents' house and doing my family out of their inheritance? So I, 28 male, used to take care of both my grandparents from the time I was roughly 19. My grandparents' health started to go downhill, and none of my 7 uncles or my mom really wanted to help out much, so I ended up moving back in with them to help out as much as I could. My grandpa was in a wheelchair, and my grandma had just gone into remission from cancer. Around 2020, when lockdown started to become a serious concern, my grandma was seriously wondering what would happen if her and my grandpa passed because they would not be able to live in their house that they had owned since around the mid-1960s. It is, according to my grandma, an old governor's mansion from the 1800s. It has 10 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms on 15 acres of land. When they bought it, it needed a ton of work, and they have spent the last 60 years making it a wonderful home, and both wanted to pass there in that house since they had raised all their kids there and even some of the grandkids. It's a family hub and everyone has grown up there. After one bad health scare with my grandpa, my grandma realized that if she lost him, she would no longer be able to afford the house with losing half of her income. So I offered to buy the house from them. I have a fairly high-paying job for my area, and because I had been living there rent-free while taking care of them, I had quite a large savings. Originally, I told her I would just give her the money or help her out, but she didn't want charity, so she and my grandpa sold me the house for $90,000, roughly 10% of the property's value, and I would let her live there until she passed, which of course I would, because they knew I would keep the house in the family, and most of my uncles and my mom just wanted to sell it off for a quick buck. Only one uncle, Josh, knew about them selling me the house and didn't mind at all because me and him had almost exclusively done all the maintenance or the housework over the years. Unfortunately, my grandpa passed in April 2021, and after that, my grandma's youngest sister moved in to spend time with her because they were both widows and could emotionally support each other. So I took advantage of lockdown interest rates and bought another house about 10 minutes away so I could still be close by if she needed anything, but have my own freedom. Sadly, last week, my grandma passed, and after the funeral, the whole family gathered for her will reading. My uncles all got nice items. My uncle Josh got my grandpa's old Ford pickup. My mom got all of my grandma's jewelry. I got nothing because I already got the house. The reading ended. All of my relatives were confused about the house and asked the lawyer, to which she said the house was already sold. Well, it didn't take long for them to put 2 and 2 together, and I'm now getting harassed by most of my family, saying I did them over. They needed the money from the sale of the house, and some have even threatened to sue me if I don't sell the house and give them their rightful inheritance. So, am I the jerk for doing them out of their inheritance? Update. I ended up talking to my Uncle Josh about what was going on with the other family members and the harassment over the house. And at about 8 o'clock tonight, he called everyone in the area and told them all to come to his house as the oldest brother for a family meeting. Everyone complied. When I arrived, a couple of my uncles had some choice words, but Josh told them to just shut up, went into his room, and brought out my grandparents' original will before the most recent one that they had left with him. In the will, it stated that he would inherit the house 100%, and the reason was because of all the work he had done to it. Over the years, he had put in a pool, fixed the cracking foundation, replaced the roof, and so much more, and that my grandparents had involved him in the sale to make sure that he was okay with not getting the house. He had told them that he didn't want a big house to take care of, and with him retiring soon, he wanted to take his money and travel and not worry about what was happening to their house. This basically squashed any complaints. So this has been a roller coaster of a day, but thank you everyone for the kind words. I'm ready for a nice drink. My Karen in-laws are demanding I have more kids even though I don't want to. My husband and I have a 4-year-old daughter together. She is our one and only, and I was done after her. I got sterilized earlier to prevent falling pregnant again. My in-laws are unhappy about this because my husband is their only kid. They've said I was too rash in making the decision because I'm young, 30, and that I should think about my daughter and them and how a bigger family is always better when you have the choice. They told me it was unfair, that I was wrong. They deserve more grandkids. That was when I told them what I did. For context, our daughter was a much wanted and very planned baby, but the first 18 months of her life were the worst of mine. She was diagnosed as being a high-needs baby, and that is underplaying it. She never stopped crying, and there was no clear cause. We were in and out of the ER with her. We never got a break because nobody could stand to babysit her for us with the crying. My in-laws were around, and they would leave because it bothered them so much to hear her cry like that. A few times, they would tell me to stress less, but I couldn't leave the house with her without getting looks or comments from strangers. We were spending so much money taking her to the hospital and the doctor to try to figure out what was wrong. We paid for tests, we paid for all kinds of different formulas and other things suggested. It was exhausting. It got so bad, my husband lost his job because he was showing up to work exhausted and unable to function. I was unable to function. I would hear her cries in my sleep, and I ended up needing therapy because for another year I would fall asleep and wake up in tears because it still haunted me. We're not sure how or why it stopped, but thank goodness it did because I was hanging on by a thread. After our daughter though, I could not stand the thought of experiencing that again. Nobody could tell us what it was, why it happened, just that there are documented cases of some babies like that. It's not a comfort to me or us. My in-laws do not go after my husband like this, I guess because he's not the one who got sterilized himself. But I said what I did because it's true. They were no help to us, and they don't owe us that. But with them demanding more grandkids from me, they should be willing to face up to the fact that they were no help when we needed it the most. They're mad. My husband told them I was right, but they claim I had no right to say that to them. I never normally would have, which is making me doubt myself. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. If they wanted more grandkids, they should have had more kids. Your decision to have kids is between you and your husband. They are your husband's parents, and therefore he should be intervening and telling them to quit their crap. The more complaining they do towards you is merely building a wall between you and them brick by brick. Not the jerk. Even if your kid was a perfect sleeper and uber calm, you don't owe them more grandkids. Your daughter was a difficult baby, and no one in the family wanted to support you to the point of people losing their jobs. That's a nightmare. They probably only want more grandbabies because they missed out, with your first daughter being a crier. Part 2 of parents trying to take my house from my brother. They broke my locks to move in while I wasn't home. Some parents can't explain why they make choices like child favoritism. So all they can do is try and stand by the kid that they backed, which is exactly what my parents tried to do. And I've practically destroyed their lives for it. Not in the legal sense, but more so an emotional one. So after I kicked my parents and brother and sister-in-law out for trying to force me to hand over my new house to my brother, I immediately went to my social media and I told the story to the whole family. It spread pretty fast, but you won't find it now because it all got deleted some time ago and I put my own profile on private. I posted about it because I knew that this was the first thing my family would do when they got home, and they'd try to twist the event to make me the villain. And I was exactly right. But I had about an hour to get started before them, and I had video evidence to back up my story about what they had done. No, I don't plan on showing the video here, so don't ask. Being preemptive worked because I got a fair number of family members on my side right away. My parents, brother, and sister-in-law must have been all set to write their own posts, but it was too late. So they didn't even bother trying to lie much. My parents, Dan, and sister-in-law had a few flying monkeys supporting them, but not much else. Plenty of others knew how entitled they already were. So what happened was something they all quickly understood and accepted. There was one person in particular that called me. I don't know who they were, but they ranted at me that I was a horrible brother and I needed to make way for a real family man. I just ended the call and blocked the number. This didn't repeat. The week went by, and my parents showed up with Dan at my front porch just like they said they would in their prior ultimatum. They rang my doorbell like crazy and also pounded on the door until I finally answered. I opened it just a crack, and they tried to shove their way in again, but I'd installed a couple of latch chains that prevented it, and even braced my body against the door for good measure. My father and brother demanded I let them in, but I said I was recording everything on camera and would call the police if they tried to force their way in again. My mother calmed them down, and then in her most sickly sweet tone asked me if I was ready to let my brother move in. I told her and the rest of them to buzz off and to never come back. My mother put on the crocodile tears and asked me why I can't just do this for Dan because he's my beloved brother. I laughed and then bluntly said I do not love him as a brother because he treated me like crap for years, and they only encouraged him to do so. They are terrible parents, and he's a terrible brother. Then I told them to leave or I'd be calling police ASAP. They all left surprisingly easily, apart from my mother's loud crying and the others giving me dirty looks. One could say making them leave was suspiciously easy. I thought the whole mess was over, but I guess I should have taken them more seriously, because they had other stupid plans. I came home later that week on Friday evening to find a moving truck and my brother's minivan parked in my driveway. It was Dan and his family there moving stuff in. He just waved to me with a grin on his face when I saw him. I was furious and told him and the rest of his family to stop. But sister-in-law smugly said to me that, like it or not, they were moving in. And then in the most fake way, while tilting her head and puckering her lips, she said that it was okay because my mommy allowed it, and I should always listen to what my mommy tells me. I seethed with rage just hearing those words and looking at her smug face. So I locked myself in my truck to call the cops right away. When they realized what I was doing, sister-in-law started pounding on my window and yelling at me to stop, and that I can't do this to her because she and Dan need the house. And she cried, "Why can't you just do this for Dan?" I responded with, "Forget Dan. It's my darn house, not his." Then she threatened to key the side of my truck unless I stopped calling the police, all of which the 911 operator heard thanks to the window being slightly open. I told sister-in-law that if she damaged my truck, I'd sue her, and she was smart enough to retreat. When the police arrived, Dan and sister-in-law, along with their kids, had locked themselves in my house. I told the cops what had happened, as well as showing them my new driver's license that had my current address on it. Then when we went to my front door, I saw that they had changed the lock, and the old lock was laying on the porch with the center of it drilled out, and the drill they used was laying right next to it, with a complete Harbor Freight drill bit set. Could they have been any more stupid leaving evidence out like that? I pointed out the broken lock and drill, then gave the police a rundown on all of the events that happened prior. Well, I guess Dan called our parents over at some point after I arrived home, because they showed up while I was talking to the cops. My parents immediately lied and started saying that I had agreed to rent my house to my brother and his family. I said that was an easily provable lie, one way or another. So Dan and sister-in-law finally came out of my house with some papers in hand. They both looked super smug, like they had somehow outsmarted me. They had actually drawn up and printed out a fake rental agreement, but my signature was not on it. There was one, but it looked nothing like my handwriting. I don't think any of them have ever actually seen my signature, so that was incredibly stupid on their part. I told my parents and Dan that that was stupidly blatant fraud, and if the cops investigated, they'd easily figure that out. And I don't think going to jail or court would do them any good. It could even make Dan lose his job, which is his only means of providing for his family. I also said I would get a lawyer and sue for damages if anything of mine was lost, stolen, or broken, and I'd call the authorities too for good measure. Dan went white and looked really scared when I said all of that, but my mother got between us and doubled down about how I should just do this for Dan and live in the darn camper so that they can finally have a family home to themselves. I yelled at her that if she thought it was a good idea, she could do it for Dan herself and let Dan have her house instead to himself. The cops separated my mother from me, and I said I wanted them all out right now, or I'll press charges. I shouted about how they had drilled out my front door lock to break in, the lease papers being obvious fakes. They badly forged my signature, and I have recorded video of sister-in-law attacking me. Those are felonies, and I could really affect their lives with it if I wanted to. And if they didn't leave, that's exactly what I'd do. The only reason I hadn't already was for the sake of Dan's kids, so they have one chance to just get out. The moment my parents heard that, I think it finally clicked that they could not force me to do this for Dan. My mother surrendered and said she'd put an end to this. Then she went over to sister-in-law and spoke to her quietly for a minute while my father spoke to Dan. Sister-in-law instantly started loudly crying and ripping up the fake rental papers into tiny bits and tossing them like confetti, only to have an officer tell her to pick them up, or he'd cite them for littering. Both of the cops at this point had the "I don't get paid enough for this" looks on their faces. Dan starts telling his kids to load their stuff back into the moving truck. The kids were all crying, and the eldest was sobbing that he won't get his own room now. Sister-in-law and Dan gathered their kids up to try and make one last pathetic attempt to guilt me with the sad family routine. You know, where they all gather together in a sort of group hug while all facing one direction. I swear, I think they had practiced it beforehand. All of the kids had the same pleading look with quivering mouths. Sister-in-law kept rubbing her pregnant belly and tilting her head to look like a sad puppy, and my brother just made the saddest face he could possibly make and said, "Please don't do this. We need to be able to live here." But I didn't falter and told them to keep packing. All the kids and sister-in-law turned the crying up to 11, and Dan yelled at me, "Are you satisfied with yourself? You've denied us a home because you're too selfish to share and help out family." I ended up laughing like a maniac and retorting that what he was trying to do was taking, not sharing, and no amount of crying will make me let his family move in because he's no brother of mine anymore. He's just an entitled jerk who thinks he can take whatever he wants from me, like when we were kids. Dan started going off on me until the cops told him to cool it or he'd be in cuffs, regardless of if I wanted to press charges or not. He sucked in his lips and looked like a mix of afraid and supremely upset. I asked the cops if they could stick around until my parents, brother, and sister-in-law had all left, and they said they had no intention of going anywhere until this had been resolved. In fact, in the next few minutes, 2 cops became 4 as more drove in for whatever reason. That gave my parents some extra incentive to get moving. I made Dan give me the keys to the new lock he'd put on my front door, though I got another lock the next day anyway, because I didn't know if he had copies of the keys or not. He was really reluctant to hand them over. Then, instead of handing them to me, he actually threw them down the street and into a storm drain while saying to go get them myself. But one of the cops scolded him for that and made him go get them. He had to pull the grate off just to get at them, and he got pretty dirty in the process. When he got the keys back, he just grumbled, then slammed them down into my hand. I then told them all to leave and to never come back. My mother said I'd be disowned for this, as if that were some kind of threat to me, and I voiced that to them. Then in an overly sarcastically way, I said something along the lines of, "Oh no, that means I won't get to come to any holidays with you guys, where I always get treated like crap by you all anyway, because Dan has always been your obvious favorite. You treated me so badly when I was growing up that if Dan ever needs an organ donor, I wouldn't give him anything. So do like you always told me to do when I was mistreated by all of you, and just get over it." My parents were floored after I said all of that, and the cops were all looking pretty judgmental at them as well. I tell you, if you want to put nasty parents like mine on the spot, confront them in front of cops, because they'll likely not try anything really stupid then. My mother just started crying and walked away. My father just stood there looking like he wanted to get me, and Dan just held his kids in defeat. Oh, and sister-in-law was off having a tantrum in my front lawn. Soon enough, they all formed a line handing out boxes and got their stuff out of my house. Nothing had been unpacked yet, so it was all taken out pretty quickly. But while doing this, my mother kept saying it wasn't too late, and I could still do it for Dan several times, each time trying to bargain more and more to try to make me change my mind. She said that Dan could pay me rent if I let them stay, and when that didn't work, she said I could move back in with them to let Dan rent my house so I wouldn't have to share the building. I told her to shut up and keep packing boxes because I don't want Dan or his family around. I don't want his money, and I certainly don't want to live with him or my parents ever again after the way that they treated me when I was a kid. Making a deal with my parents would be like making a deal with the devil to me. Sister-in-law ended up having another tantrum after hearing that and threw a box down, then sat on the ground to have a pity party because she didn't want to go back to sharing a house with my parents. And she just sat looking angry and sad there until everyone else was finished. She didn't even want to get up when it was time to leave. They finally got everything out of the house and into the truck. So before they left, I laid into my parents one last time about all of the crap that they put me through growing up. And with 4 cops being right there, they couldn't do much other than stand there and take it for once. I called them out on so many things that happened, and even pointed out how they couldn't just do something nice for me, like letting me stay over with my camper when I was homeless and trying to get back on my feet. How they let Dan and sister-in-law ridicule me and call me a bum. Well, who's the bum now? They wanted to kick me out of my own house so Dan could stay in it free of charge, yet when I needed a place to go, they wanted to gouge me for more than I could afford just to park my camper when they knew I was out of the job. There were more extremely judgmental stares from the cops when I said all of that. So I put my parents on the spot one more time and asked them what I ever did other than being born to deserve being treated so badly. Because when I finally have a bit of success in life, they want to snatch it away from me for their favorite kid, since they'd rather I give everything to Dan and have nothing for myself. I bought my house using the money that I earned. I owed them nothing, and I won't be asking anything from them ever again, because clearly I will never be anything more than a doormat or a cash cow in their eyes. I got no answers from them. They just stood there looking like a fish out of water. So I continued ranting and asked them what in God's name made them think they were such good parents after all of that. My father's face was red, but more from embarrassment than anger this time, and my mother was crying that she was a horrible person. I bluntly agreed that she is a horrible person. They all are, and they knew it. But if I'd called them out on all this stuff in private instead of in public, they'd just get mad at me and still act like I'm in the wrong. They just kept up the denial for so long that it became a part of who they are. My mother buried her face in my father's jacket to cry, and my father looked more defeated than I've ever seen him. Dan and his family avoided me entirely as they finished putting everything back in the moving truck. I made sure nothing of mine was stolen. Not that I'd had a chance to get much furniture yet. I was lucky to even have a couch at that time. They all got back into their vehicles, and sister-in-law just stood staring at me with malice until my brother finally got her to drive the minivan home. And as soon as they were all gone, I got back online again and spilled the beans about what happened. My parents were too embarrassed to even try and defend their actions this time, and while the family was somewhat split before this incident, it was now a landslide in my favor. Nearly all of the family has sided with me after this incident, and those who haven't simply aren't siding with anybody. No matter how much my parents previously tried the "we did it for Dan" line, no one listened anymore. So any remaining familial support that they had is now gone. Many in the family who I expected wouldn't side with me did. That includes the former flying monkeys. So I guess they finally had enough. Around that time, I offered to host half the family at next Christmas Eve in my new house. My parents were not invited. I wasn't blocked on my brother and sister-in-law's profiles, surprisingly, and I saw sister-in-law had her 4th baby in early November. They're still living with my parents. I'm pretty sure they knew that I was watching because sister-in-law kept making passive-aggressive posts every couple of weeks or so about not having enough space while living with my parents, probably to see if she can still guilt me. And I'm sure it's driving my mother and father up the wall because they aren't getting any peace and quiet in their old age with 3 rowdy, obnoxious kids, a mentally unstable sister-in-law, my golden child brother, and a newborn baby in the house all at once. Perhaps they could move into a camper in their own backyard and let Dan take over the house completely. They might get some peace then. Yeah, they could do that for Dan. There was supposed to be more, but this post got way too long, so I'll be posting a part 3 later. That time, the company lawyers told me to contact law enforcement. This took place years ago, but still makes me laugh at the sheer stupidity of it all. It starts as all truly great sagas published on the internet begin, when I met a random guy through a friend at a bar in the city. Let's call the guy I met Mark for the purpose of this post. My friend had introduced me to Mark because for a few years leading up to that introduction, I shared an idea I had for a business with anyone who would listen. I was told Mark wanted to start his own business, had worked in the industry, knew a lot about the subject matter required, and thought my idea was good. Mark and I met up for a lunch. We hit it off. He said he'd start the business as the CEO and agreed to me taking a part-time operational role. I agreed to help solely in a part-time operational role because I couldn't afford to quit my day job. I put in 15% of the cash for 5% ownership since Mark was going to put in founder hours, 80 plus hours a week, and agreed to put up 85% of the cash, which was more money than I could afford to risk on a new venture. I worked part-time, I did what I said I would do. I even tried to be of assistance on things I had no experience with. I connected Mark with a fellow I had done business with before. We'll call him Paul. Paul and I got into a dispute ourselves. More on this later. Anyway, let's fast forward a few months, and I got into a dispute with Mark over stationery. Yes, stationery not being to his liking caused him to flip out. This was despite him picking the stationery out. Next up, the contract I got from Mark was not quite what we agreed. The legal work required a few months to get done, and I had expected delays, but when I finally got it, the paperwork didn't represent what I had agreed to own. Not only that, but my investment wasn't being acknowledged under the terms we had committed to when I put the money in. Now, as I said, I wasn't able to risk much money, and I only invested what I could afford to lose, so this wasn't a huge sum of money. I didn't want to make a big deal about it since the amount was small, and he began promising a new contract when the business could pay for the lawyers to make changes. I signed nothing. Then it worsened. Mark and I start to fight anytime we're in a room together. As I think back, it's almost comical how angry he would get in my presence. I have other things to do with my time than squabble over stuff like stationery, so I worked on my areas of the business and hoped things would grow. I stopped in whenever I could and would help out regularly as needed with as little Mark interaction as possible. Paul would intervene sometimes when Mark would get particularly difficult to be around. Anyway, fast forward about 2 years, and Mark can't help but tell everyone who will listen that the business is going well. I have no idea how well things are going because Mark isn't giving me any updates. I get a call around Christmas from Mark. He wishes me a happy holiday, then drops the bomb on me that he wants to terminate my involvement and refund my investment. I decline the investment refund and say I'm happy to no longer work with him. In my head, I think it's kind of hilarious that he thinks this will just end that easily, but I say nothing to that accord to him. Mark and I hang up, with him aggravated about my refusal to take the refund on my investment. Mark then sends me an email that I had resigned. This had no basis in fact, but certainly was creative about what we had just discussed. I correct him immediately in a reply stating that he wanted to no longer work together and that I can see that being the case, but want to discuss my investment. A few days later, Mark demands I come pick up a check for a reimbursement of my investment. I do not come and get it. Next thing you know, the company attorney huffs and puffs and tries to scare me with some strongly worded letter. This is the same idiot attorney who messed up my contract to work on the business and my investment agreement. Let's call this attorney Mr. Cohn for the sake of this story. I send an email response to Mr. Cohn that he messed up. The company seems to be doing well, that I hear rumors about how well, that I want to be on this for the foreseeable future, and I will not take a 1-1 cash for what I put in. The attorney then emails me back, stating in writing that Mark never accepted my electronic transfer into the company account. Instead, Mark has another company he accepted the money into. A company that's different from the name of the recipient on my electronic transfer. A company that would be committing wire fraud to accept the money I sent. On that note, I did some sleuthing online. I found out Mark had been forming one company every month or two. Then there were media reports and documents he let slip and shared drives he forgot I had access to from when we agreed to work together. Mark was too cheap and stupid to pay for tech help, so he was using my shared folders I had created, and I certainly wasn't obligated to turn off the shares if he wanted to work out of them. Those documents showed me Mark had recently raised money in the company I sent the payment to at 200 times the valuation I had bought into it at, and Mark didn't disclose my investment to the new investors. Mark had, however, put me on documents showing my ownership to previous investors. Not on documents I had ever seen before, but documents he had been sending around. When I share my suspicions that Mark is committing wire fraud with Mr. Cohn, I'm told I'm the one breaking the law by knowing anything about the investment documents the company has used. Mr. Cohn tells me that by not picking up my check, I will not be entitled to any money and to contact law enforcement if I think something illegal has happened. He cautions, though, that I'll be the one in trouble. Cue the malicious compliance. I let the different respective members of the Securities and Exchange Commission, along with law enforcement, know what happened to me. I provided them all of the documents I had from the matter. It took about 5 years for this investigation to conclude, for charges to be brought, for a trial to conclude, and for Mark to go to jail. They say government is slow, but they aren't kidding with just how slow. Maybe it was slow because Mark was running a large, tens of millions of dollars large, fraud. Anyway, Mark will be serving time for about 30 felony charges they found uncovering the details of his Ponzi scheme. he will be away for a long time. I never did anything wrong. With the information I was able to provide, Mr. Cohn ended up getting disbarred. There were other things Mr. Cohn did outside of what is shared in this post that I cannot share, or it could help to identify me to the folks involved. The investigators credited me with bringing the wire fraud to their attention. I lost my money in this ordeal, but gained an education, and I got to help bring down a crook. The sheer stupidity of Mark is that he didn't even follow the business plan I had. He just used it as a story to convince investors to give him money. It's a business model that works very, very well. It took a few more years, but I'm now in a position to be pursuing this business full-time with people of high integrity who all work together to ensure each other's success. We expect to have an extremely profitable year in 2023 after proving the business model worked in 2022. Have me sign a weird contract or I fail? Okay. Last semester, I had to take a class from a professor who wasn't bad as being incompetent, but definitely was one of those "I have a new way to teach that I developed" kind of professors. She also gave the vaguest instructions on what she did want in her turned-in work and didn't believe in study guides, as she wanted to encourage reading the material. Honestly, I got more out of the book than her class, and buying the book alone would have been far cheaper. Trying to get direction out of this lady was worse than trying to pull teeth, met with mostly "do your best." On top of this, she apparently handed out a grading contract on the first day to everyone we had to sign in return. I missed this due to being sick, so I didn't get it until later. Said contract basically boiled down to indicating what grade you wanted at the start of the semester. You either met the conditions for that grade or you would fail. So basically, by saying you wanted an A, you either met the qualifications for an A or you could fail, even if you could have gotten a B or a C instead. If you decided to play it safe with saying you wanted a C, even if you exceeded and would normally get a B or an A, you would just get a C. So to cut out a lot of the drama of the semester, two things. First being I had surgery at the beginning of the semester. Second is I was working full-time while at school to pay for said school. Both ended up with me missing a lot of work, and normally I would just cut my losses, except I'm very close to my degree and my professor said I could make up the work. Otherwise, I would fail and need to retake the class anyway in the spring. So I decided I had nothing to lose and buckled down with basically getting next to no sleep for weeks. I had over a month and a half at least amount of work and 2 weeks to do it in. Now finally, this is where the malicious compliance comes in. During an exchange where I was emailing my work, she told me I still hadn't done her contract, which at that point, only a few weeks out from finals, I didn't get the point. But she told me either I did the contract or I would fail. She also had let slip that not doing the final would drop you a letter grade, but not fail you. The only exception to her weird contract that wasn't in it, and one I confirmed very deliberately in writing. At this point, I was bone tired and honestly forcing myself to continue working on anything, which may not sound like much, but with my mental health history was Herculean effort. I just wanted the pain to stop and a full night's rest. So I decided if not doing the final just dropped me by a letter grade, then I would just do the work for a B and end up with the grade I thought was fair for how the semester had gone. This meant for even more work, but it also meant I didn't need to worry about a final and could finally just sleep, which I explained as much to the professor when she asked me why I didn't have a final turned in on the last day. That so far has been the last I ever spoke to or seen of her. Imagine my surprise when I actually ended up with a B in her class. Personally, I take this to be her never wanting me in her class again, and I don't know if it makes me a jerk overall. But I do know she apparently has it now that not doing the final is an automatic D. So sorry to anyone who got her after me. Am I the jerk for telling my son he has to go to university, get a job, or get out? My wife and I have 3 kids. They're 17, 15, and 10. My oldest has no intention to do anything after high school, at least none that he's made clear to us. So I gave him the same ultimatum my parents gave me. Either go to university, get a job, or get out. I chose to travel the world for 2 years. I had a lot of sailing experience, and my father had a lot of friends in that community, so I was able to sail around the world earning money and working my butt off. It wasn't a 2-year vacation. My family is well off, and I could have chosen an indolent life, but I knew I would be a disappointment if I chose that. So when I got back, I enrolled in university and eventually went to work for the family business. My wife thinks that I'm being unfair to our poor baby boy by throwing him out into the world. I'm not. We have the money to pay for his university. We have the money for all 3 kids. My middle child will probably end up with a good chunk of it in her pocket. She's on track for an academic as well as a golf scholarship. The 10-year-old is 10, and who knows what he's going to do, but he knows the plan. We have not been secretive about this rule. My wife and I agreed that we would raise productive members of society before we got engaged. Her and my son think I'm being cruel to expect him to fend for himself at 18. I've offered him multiple opportunities to do other things. He has no interest in anything beyond his computer. I'm at a loss. I don't think I'm wrong for expecting an adult to be an adult. My parents have already told him that they will not be giving him any money if he isn't in school or working. My wife is threatening to use her salary to support him. I don't have any say in that. I won't actually kick him out of the house, but I will stop paying his bills and cut off our grocery budget by 20%. If she wants to work so he doesn't have to, then there's nothing I can do about that. It's not fending for oneself when the parent tells the kids, "Go to university, we pay for it. You stay under our roof or work. Keep your money to yourself. You stay under our roof or choose to do nothing with your life and you'll have to fend for yourself." Not at all. You don't even give him ultimatums about what to study or what job to take. He could bum around from major to major or from minimum wage job to another while figuring out what he wants to do with his life, with all expenses paid. He's not going to get sudden inspiration on how to spend his adult life by staying home and doing nothing. Not the jerk for actually parenting your kid. Well, what do you think? Is Opie a jerk or not? Please let us know. Am I the jerk for refusing a person a plate after they showed up uninvited? Everyone is in their mid to late 20s. My boyfriend and I have been hosting Monday night dinner parties at our apartment for about a year. It's not every week, but most. I have food allergies and it's hard to go out, so this has been a good alternative. About 2 months ago, an old high school friend, Layla, moved to my city with her fiancé, Lucas, and I started inviting them to our dinners. Lucas is insufferable. He will never try again his food before adding additional seasoning, which is a pet peeve of mine, but I could get over it if he ate it, but it ends up directly in the trash. He'll add a bunch of salt to an already salted dish, take one bite and then say, "Ew, it's too salty," or dump a ton of red pepper on it and then complain that it's too spicy, etc. It's like he's deliberately ruining his plate so he can complain about it. It's probably petty, but it really gets under my skin, and it bugs my boyfriend too to toss out food that would have been perfectly good without his tampering. I put up with this for 5 dinners, and then I stopped inviting them. I've still texted and met with Layla for coffee, but I haven't extended another dinner invite. They showed up this Monday without an invite right as we were starting dinner. Lucas sat down and started filling a plate before my boyfriend stopped him and told him he wasn't welcome to waste more of our food. It turned into an argument where Lucas insisted he shouldn't be forced to eat things he doesn't like, and I got angry and told him how could he be forced when he wasn't even invited. Voices were raised, and eventually Layla and Lucas left, but the mood was ruined for the night. Everyone who was present agreed with me, but I guess Layla either told our old friend group or posted about it, because I've gotten an odd amount of texts from people I haven't talked to in years calling me a jerk for kicking them out over my bad cooking. It's not bad cooking, so maybe I am. A small update. I received a very enlightening text from an old friend that Layla has kept close with. Apparently, Lucas did not want to move at all, but Layla was offered an amazing opportunity here, so he agreed. According to this friend, Lucas has also sabotaged happy hour with her new coworkers and always, coincidentally, needs her at home whenever she wants to go out with new friends. It seems like he is maybe trying to make her unhappy socially here, so she'll be willing to move back home. I feel a little guilty for not picking up on this sooner, but I'm grateful for the perspective. I plan to reach out to Layla tomorrow and see if we can have a real talk about her situation. Not the jerk. While you don't owe it to them, I think it might have gone over better to have talked to Layla while you were having coffee, to let her know that his behavior is insulting and wasteful, and that you wouldn't be inviting him to any more dinners if he continued. Unless you explicitly told them, you can't assume they knew it was bothering you, as reasonable and understandable as your position is. I'm sorry to hear that this happened, but I hope you have lovely dinner nights moving forward. How nice of you and your boyfriend to host this regularly. Not the jerk. Make sure you respond to everyone telling them that 1. Lucas and Layla showed up unannounced and uninvited to your home for your dinner party. 2. Lucas helped himself to your dinner without asking or being invited to it, and you were not planning on 2 extra guests. Then Lucas got mad at your boyfriend when he was stopped because he was not welcome to it. 3. Lucas has behaved very rudely the first and only 5 times he's been properly invited to your dinner parties and has not been invited back since because of his inappropriate behavior and wasteful conduct. Therefore, you will not tolerate anyone's disrespect and offensive comments, especially when they do not have all of the facts to properly understand the situation to support his side. Boss threatens me for being 1 minute late. Huge mistake. This happened about 4 years ago. I do construction and we start fairly early. Boss got tired of people walking in at 6:05 or 6:03 when we start at 6, even though he was a few minutes late more consistently than any of us were. So he said, "If you aren't standing in front of me at 6 o'clock when we start, then I'm docking 15 minutes from your time for the day." The next day, I accidentally forgot my tape measure in my car and had to walk back across the job site to grab it. Made it inside at 6:01. Boss chewed me out and told me he was serious yesterday and docked me 15 minutes. So I took all of my tools off right then and there and sat down on a bucket. He asked why I wasn't getting to work, and I said, "I'm not getting paid until 6:15, so I'm not doing any work until 6:15. I enjoy what I do, but I don't do it for free." He tried to argue with me about it until I said, "If you're telling me to work without paying me, then that's against the law. You really want to open the company and yourself up to that kind of a risk? Maybe I'm the kind to sue, maybe I'm not. But if you keep on telling me to work after you docked my time, then we're gonna find out one way or the other." He shut up pretty quickly after that, and everyone else saw me do it and him cave. So now they weren't gonna take his crap either. Over the next few days, guys that would have been 1 or 2 minutes late just text the boss, "Hey, sorry boss, would have been there at 6:02 and gotten docked, so I'll see you at 6:15 and I'll get to work then." And then sat in their cars until 6:15 and came in whenever their time started. So between people doing what I did or just staying in their cars instead, he lost a ton of productivity and morale because he decided that losing 15 minutes of productivity per person and feeling like a big man was better than losing literally 1 or 2 minutes of productivity, even though everyone just stands around getting material together for the day until about 6:10 anyway. After a few weeks of that, he got chewed out by his boss over the loss of productivity and how bad the doc timesheets were looking and reflecting poorly on him as a leader because we were missing deadlines over it. And it showed that he doesn't know how to manage his people. And then suddenly, his little self-implemented policy was gone and we all worked like we were supposed to and caught back up fairly quickly. Worker solidarity for the win. Not one person took his crap and worked that time for free after he tried to swing his weight around on them. But obviously, I was a target after that and only made it 2 more months before he had stacked up enough BS reasons to get away with firing me when I called in a few days in a row after my mom fell and I took off work to take care of her and monitor her for a while during the day. I worked a midnight shift at a hotel. I was the only one there on that shift. After a few days, I was asked why I hadn't clocked out for my half-hour meal break and that it was mandatory to do so and my pay would reflect that half-hour off nightly. Soon after, I was chewed out because guests had tried to check in and there was no desk clerk at the desk. And where was I? I said I probably was napping as it was my meal break and I had punched out. They said I was still supposed to check people in during that time. I just said, "Sorry, I don't work off the clock." No more punching out for a meal break. I quit anyway. Don't care about people calling me on your old number? Okay. I had just moved to Australia and gotten a new phone. But as it turns out, my number was someone else's old number. Every other week, I'd get calls by a tradie who wanted to know why I wasn't on site, mate, or what I wanted done with building project ABC. Every time I explained at length that they got the wrong number, and quite often folks on the other end were absolutely rude or thought I was just messing with them and insisted that I answer their questions or show up on site now. I was over it, so I Googled my own number and did some digging and eventually found out the guy who had my number before me, then his new number, and then I called him. I politely explained my dilemma, pointed out that there were 2 websites still having his old, my now new number, and if he could please change this and let his contacts know about his new number and to delete the old one as it was getting quite tedious for me. By that time, I had used my number for work, visa applications, and landlords and friends, and changing it would have been a huge pain. I explained all of that. Well, of course, he was just as pleasant as most of his contacts and told me something along the lines of, "I don't give a hoot, mate. That's not my problem. Get done over. Sort out your own crap, mate." Well, the universe provides, and so I got a great opportunity to do just that only a few weeks later. I received a call in the early hours of one morning by another disgruntled guy telling me that he was early and demanding to know where I wanted the sand put down and how to get in. I asked what sand and was told he had a full truckload of sand as ordered and no one was on site and it was all fenced off. Very briefly did I think about launching into my explanation, but I was tired and over it and then realized the opportunity provided. I snapped back at him with no uncertainty. "Mate, it's all good. Dump it all right in the driveway, front of the fence. We'll sort it out when we get there." The guy said, "You sure, mate? It's a lot of sand." Me, "Absolutely sure, mate. Thanks a lot." Him, "All right then, boss," and hangs up. Well, I go back to bed, snoozing for another hour with a big smile until my phone rings again, and I see it's old mate with his new number who I had saved when I called him a few weeks ago. I pick up rather chipper, and he doesn't waste any time going off on me and telling me how he has no access to the site and that he has to move a literal ton of sand by hand and whether or not I told the sand guy to dump it all there. I replied, "You told me to sort this out myself. This is me sorting it out. You can remove the numbers and let your contacts know or not. Totally up to you, mate." He was fuming, called me a few more choice words, promising to find me and a lot more before we ended the conversation. However, the numbers disappeared from the internet really quickly after that, and I never got another call again. I still have my number, and every time I see a truck with sand, I chuckle to myself, thinking of this guy moving a ton of sand by hand and losing a fair few hours of labor because he was a jerk and couldn't be bothered sending a few texts. Am I the jerk for accidentally destroying someone's book? Last week, I borrowed one of my friend's books. We're not that close, but we both share a love for reading. Anyway, I was reading said book whilst in the bath last week, and it led to me accidentally dropping the book in the tub. The pages are ruined, and the book has expanded quite a bit, but in my opinion, it's still readable. Of course, though, I still felt very guilty, and I offered to replace it. She refused and said that I shouldn't worry about it. Accidents happen after all. But now I found out that she's going behind my back and telling all of our mutual friends about it. She isn't saying it directly, but she's heavily implying that I didn't try to do anything about it. I'm pretty sure I'm not the jerk, but some of my other friends say I should just be the bigger person and replace her book. However, I'm feeling quite hurt by her words, and I'm now very reluctant to purchase something for her. So what should I do about it? Should I just ignore it, or just go ahead and buy her another book? Edit. I've replied to a couple of comments, but I think it's better if I just add everything here so everyone can have all of the information. Firstly, I offered to replace the book like 5 or 6 times, but each time my friend told me to not worry and that it would just be a waste of money if I did decide to replace it. After all, I've already read it, she said to me on multiple times. Also, regarding the bath controversy, I often read books in the bath to relax a bit in the evening. My friend knows this and even does it herself. I also mentioned that those were probably my plans. I said something like, "I can't wait to read this book in the bath later," and she didn't show any expression of discomfort whatsoever. In fact, she slightly encouraged me by saying something like, "I'm so jealous. I've got work later, so I don't have time to relax." Jealousy, like in a friendly, joking way. Edit 2. Many people are wondering if the book was extra special in some way, excluding the fact that it's a book she bought for herself, and are also wondering what the book actually was, but no, it wasn't a special edition, nor was it sentimental. This may also come across as defensive, but I truly don't believe the issue lies in me reading the book in the bathtub. My friend has also read the books I've lent her in the bath many times, and though it may seem like I'm careless with other people's books, this is the first time I've ever even slightly damaged one of her books. I truly did feel bad and insisted on replacing it multiple times, but each time she refused, so I just accepted it and moved on. You owe her a new book. You took a risk with someone else's property and destroyed it. You're the jerk for thinking that you don't have to take responsibility to replace what you destroyed. Edit. You should have bought a replacement and given it to her when you told her that you had an accident with the old one. Your biggest fault here was offering to replace it instead of just doing the right thing. What's the point of offering to replace the book? Gee, I was doing something foolish and ended up destroying your property. Would you like me to replace it, or can I just forget it and move on? Would you like the waterlogged copy back? Like what? You should have automatically bought her a new one. How is there even any confusion here? You're the jerk. Because sometimes people don't care. 80% of the books on my shelf, I wouldn't even care if they went missing, much less damaged but still readable. If someone damaged one of those books, I'd just shrug it off and say don't worry. Friend is the jerk for making it a big deal after implying that it wasn't and turning down an offer of replacement. OP would be the jerk if they didn't even offer or pretended that they did nothing wrong. Everyone sucks here. You for taking a borrowed book into the bath, and your friend for pretending like everything's fine and then talking behind your back about it. If you want to preserve the friendship, tell her that you know what she's been saying. You'll get a new copy of the book for her, but that it hurts you that she told you it was a non-issue and then implied to others that you hadn't tried to fix it. How she responds will be very telling, and you can go from there. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or their friend? Please let us know. Tell your friend she can have one of ours. We've got tons of them. Am I the jerk for refusing to apologize to a teacher? I drop off my 9-year-old son at school at 8 a.m. every morning so that he has time to meet up with his friends and whatnot before they line up at 8:30 a.m. Basically, parents drop their kids off at the front gate and a staff member supervises to make sure that the kids get on campus quickly and keep the flow of traffic moving. If they're not coming to school via car, then they have to enter campus on the other side, which is not preferable because there's a lot of traffic and construction. The system works every day but Friday when they have this one teacher doing gate supervision. She spends way too much time chatting with people. I started keeping track of how much time this is adding up, and it's a lot. Today, she spent time showing a parent pictures on her phone and talking. I honked and I was ignored. I can't let my son out of my car until a staff visually sees him transition from my car and onto campus. Eventually, I got out of my car and asked the mom and teacher how much longer they were going to be. There's like 20 cars behind me and 3 ahead of me, and this only happens when this teacher is doing gate supervision. The mom drove off and the teacher said nothing. Later today, I got an email from the VP telling me that I yelled at her and the mom and created an unsafe situation by getting out of my car. I corrected that version by saying that the teacher was creating an unsafe situation by creating traffic. The VP asked me if I yelled or had cursed, and I said no. She said that someone said that they had recorded me doing so. I told her not to play games with me because she'll lose, because guess what? I recorded it too. All of a sudden, it's a misunderstanding, and I was asked to apologize to the teacher. I said I would after she acknowledged that she was wrong. Not the jerk. Funny how they changed their tune because you actually recorded it. What would irk me the most about this is that the VP was ready to lie and let the actual unsafe situation continue. Like, really? Lying about yelling and about the recording? And then claiming you're creating an unsafe situation? Neither of these people should be in charge of the kids. I'd file a formal complaint for creating an unsafe situation and for fabricating facts and creating a hostile environment with the video and emails as reference. Maybe even suggesting worry about retaliation against your kid. She wasn't wrong. She purposely lied to try and get you in hot water. I see nothing here to apologize for at all. Just going purely off the post, I'd say not the jerk. However, someone who records themselves politely asking how long something will take and uses the phrase, "Don't play games with me because you'll lose," you sound like a piece of work. I won't consider that inference into judgment. I really don't like when people do that here. So I'm still saying not the jerk. But boy howdy, you don't come off as a likable person. Ask for a meeting between you, the principal, and the teacher. Bring an iPad or a laptop so you can all watch the video. Then ask the teacher to explain why she lied about the interaction and whether or not the principal is going to reprimand the teacher for lying. Not the jerk. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or the teacher? Please let us know. I don't want you to do anything related to the project ever again. I work in technical theater design, and I was approached by a writer and producer to direct her show after I had been recommended to her by a mutual friend. Let's call her Jane. Jane had been working on this script for a couple years, and it was her baby. The script was actually pretty good, and the cast she had already hired was awesome, so I agreed to do the job. The show had already began rehearsals before I was hired, as the previous director had suddenly quit. After one rehearsal, I immediately realized why. Jane was an absolute nightmare. She had no idea what she was doing. She had never produced theater and knew nothing about any aspect of live event productions, blocking, lighting design, etc. However, she also wanted to control and micromanage everything. A majority of my job ended up consisting of her freaking out about something I had done, then me spending 20 minutes explaining why it had to be done that way. The cast hated her, and she made every rehearsal miserable. She wasn't interested in watching the scenes to see how good the actors were. She would spend every rehearsal buried in her script and getting upset each time an actor missed a word or said them instead of they, or other minor, easily fixable things. The only reason the cast stuck around is because this woman did have some industry contacts, and she was inviting them all to the show. She constantly bragged about it and said she would share all of her connections with the cast so they could benefit from the show. About 2 weeks before Tech Week, I realized she hadn't hired a lighting designer, booth operator, stage manager, or anyone at all to run the show. She had been expecting me to do it all once the time came. I almost quit on the spot, but I ultimately stuck in because the cast was so great and I knew the show would never happen if I left. She'd never be able to do anything on her own. I ended up calling in a couple favors, and somehow we got everything done. The show actually turned out great and the audience loved it. She had paid a guy to professionally film 2 performances, and she really got great stuff on tape. After the show ended, the cast asked for a list of emails and numbers of the industry that was in attendance so their agents could follow up. Jane betrayed them and refused to share any info about her contacts. She said she didn't want them bothering people that she knew. I was furious, so I sent her an email saying, "You need to share that list. It's what you promised. You owe it to them." She replied, "This is no longer any of your business. Your job is done. I don't want you to do anything related to the project ever again." Cue malicious compliance. 1 week later, she sent me an email. Apparently, she was trying to raise funding to do the show again and had entered the video she had recorded into a prestigious online theater festival. The audio didn't turn out great in the recording. She realized that she didn't have any of the sound effects, the marked production script, the QLab show file, the projections, the blocking notes, nothing. I had done all of the work and I had all the files. She had never even asked to see them before. If she wanted to replicate the show, she'd need these things. Otherwise, she'd have to pay someone to start from scratch. If she wanted to fix the audio, she'd need all the music and sound files. She demanded that I send her these things immediately. I replied, "Per your previous instructions, I'm not to do any more work on the project. My job is done." Then I deleted everything. She was royally ticked off. Her realizing she had nothing tangible to remount her show almost made it worth 2 months of painful rehearsals. Am I the jerk for not taking in my son and his family? My ex-wife and I adopted our son when he was 6. We had been his foster parents for 3 years and we wanted to make it official. He met his wife when he was 18. She knew he was adopted and she thought it would be good for him to get to know his biological parents. Over the course of the next few years, my ex-wife and I were slowly pushed out of his life. When they got married, we only received a wedding invitation. We were not part of the wedding party. His biological parents and their spouses sat at the family table. We have not had the opportunity to meet our granddaughter, and she's nearly 3 years old now. I'm sad about the situation, and my ex-wife is heartbroken. I hate to see her hurt when all she did was try and be a good mom. I can honestly say that I'm not a fan of my daughter-in-law, and I wish she had never come into our lives. Recently, they've run into financial problems, and they lost their home. My son's job is in the city we live in, and his biological parents and his in-laws all live in other cities. He called my ex-wife to ask if they could stay with us while they got back on their feet. I said no. My ex-wife wants to, but I refuse to be used. He has been distancing himself from us for 9 years now. The only reason he called was because he's desperate. I don't think I owe him anything. I offered to pay for whatever it costs for him to move his family to the cities where his real family is. His wife called me to scream at me. She says that I'm abandoning my son and grandchild. I said that because he didn't think of us as parents when they got married and had their kid, then they should not think of us that way now. Then I blocked her. My ex-wife says that I'm being too harsh and that I need to forgive them. But here's the thing, I don't think it will change anything. All that will happen is that they live in our home and then they abandon my wife again as soon as the chance presents itself. Edit. He was removed from his biological parents because they were very young and it wasn't a good situation. If they had been older or more stable at the time, I'm sure they would not have severed their parental rights. Edit. His mom and I are divorced. She's in an extended care facility and he cannot live there. I kept our home. I'm still friends with her and we see the kids together as a family. I still care for her deeply, but her condition wasn't something she wanted me to deal with. Our son didn't even know we had separated when he called her. Not the jerk. He's been pushing you away for 9 years for his biological parents. He's clearly indicated you are not his parents. He doesn't get to randomly come back and majorly disrupt your lives because he's in a bad position now. He would 100% be using you, and his wife sounds awful. You were more than generous to offer to pay for them to relocate. I understand your wife wanting to bring him back, but it sounds like he has no remorse over how he's treated y'all for almost a decade. Not the jerk. So his biological parents weren't in the picture, but now they get to reap the rewards of having their adult son and his family in their lives, while you've never even been able to meet your 3-year-old granddaughter. You live in the same city and you've never seen her? They don't care about you. Calling you to ask for help is outrageous after abandoning you and your wife. And I'm with you. If you give in and be the good guy, you'll end up getting abandoned again the literal second they have another option. The fact that his wife called you screaming in an effort to manipulate you is all the proof you need of that. At this point, I'd be considering going no contact to lessen the pain that you feel. Not the jerk. His wife did this and your son let her. Shame on them. I admire that you stood up to them and said no. I'm more like your wife, and having been in a similar situation, I wished I would have said no. All they did was use me. Furlough? Okay, if you want. I worked for a very large Fortune 100 company a few years ago. Our division was in a particular industry that was linked to oil and gas, so when oil prices declined, our revenues declined. There was no demand for our products because there was no investment in the market segment. There was literally nothing we could do. If no one was building oil refineries, no one was buying our tech, no matter how good or bad a job we did. About 7 to 8 years ago, the market was way down. We were very lean and our industry very profitable, so we still made excellent margins, but sales were down, so our profits were down. I think we had a target of about $925 million in profit for our division, and we were on track to maybe make $850 million. Still wildly profitable. However, the corporate office was complaining about the missing $75 million. Go find a way to bridge the gap. One of the things they did to make up some of the lost profit was to cut everyone's paycheck by 10%, and then tell us to work 10% fewer hours, 36-hour work week instead of 40. This sucked, but they instituted it in late spring, and we did summer hours every summer where you'd work 9-hour days Monday through Thursday and then half a day on Friday. So what it really meant was you worked 9 hours Monday through Thursday and then you took your furlough Friday. So the pay cut stung a little, but you essentially got a 3-day weekend every week, which made it a little better. What they didn't consider though was human nature. We were in a highly specialized industry with a ton of very educated, talented, dedicated scientists and engineers, and I was a dweeb finance person. Most of these people lived in the office. No one worked a 40-hour work week. 50 hours was the norm, and plenty of people worked more. Nobody didn't care because they were devoted to work that was interesting, and we were generally pretty fairly paid. However, cut their paychecks, and everyone says, "Forget you. You only get my 36 hours now." I was in a meeting the first month after the policy took place, and the CEO and CFO were in disbelief that our billable hours had fallen by more than 30%, not 10% as expected. Yes, we got paid by the hour worked because we charged for engineering time, not just for products. So I had the distinct pleasure of explaining to the executives that yes, you only cut people's pay and hours by 10%, but guess what? Everyone quit working unpaid overtime and only worked 36 hours to the minute. And anytime something happened on a Friday, sorry, there's no one here to help. But it gets worse. All summer, most people were pretty content to enjoy the short-end schedule. But come September, summer hours end, and everyone's back in the office 5 days a week and leaving after lunch on Friday. Plus, for the older people, the company had a generous pension plan that paid out something like 80% pay after you hit retirement age. So a lot of these people decided retiring for 80% was better than working for 90% and retired. Tons of others left. The company lost literally centuries of highly specialized knowledge and experience, walking out the door, and because it was specialized, it was very hard to replace. Originally, the program was supposed to save the company $17 million. They lost way more than that in lost productivity, lower billings, higher rework, and just lost opportunity. I don't know how it turned out. I left when everyone else did after the summer. But my friends still work there, and they tell me that the company still hasn't recovered. Am I the jerk for telling my husband to stop bending over backwards for my mother after I established boundaries with her? For starters, my husband has parent issues. He was abandoned by his biological parents and put into foster care as a toddler. He never had a stable home as he bounced around different families until he turned 14, then spent 4 years in a group home. When we met, my family took to him very fast. He and my mother, who's 54, specifically developed a close relationship. For Mother's Day last year, he gave my mom a card and wrote a message thanking her for treating him like a son. He said she was the mom he had always dreamt about having. It was sweet. I never minded him treating her as if she were his mother. However, my mom is very extra. She wants to be involved in our lives a bit too much, which my husband only supports. She loves coming over to cook for us or inviting us over to her house for dinner. When our kid was born, her wanting to be around intensely increased. I appreciated her help, but her being at our house almost 24/7 really got on my nerves as I felt she was invading our privacy. I established boundaries with her and basically told her she can only come over when I invite her. I didn't invite her over for a few weeks, which upset her. I also declined the numerous invites to her house. Between Thanksgiving and Christmas, she was involved in a serious automobile accident which shattered her leg. She needed constant care while she recovered, which none of my sisters could provide due to their jobs. After our daughter was born, I became a stay-at-home mom and was expected to care for my mother. I declined and received much scrutiny from both my family and husband. She had no other choice but to be transferred to a rehab facility. Everything was fine until reports circulated about the facility 2 weeks ago, which resulted in 2 caregivers and the director being arrested. My husband completely freaked out, said we needed to get her out of there. However, the incident that occurred didn't involve my mother's side. It was the memory care unit. My mom had been treated just fine. My husband got my sisters involved, which of course supported him. I was very adamant that she cannot come to our house. The next thing I know, our guest bedroom and bath had been cleaned up. I again told my husband, I'm not going to allow this. Lo and behold, he arrives home with my mother. I was absolutely upset. He said it would be fine, as my sisters made a schedule to come over and care for her between their work schedules. So great, now I have my sisters invading my privacy too. I told my husband he married me, not me and my mom. I told him to stop bending over backwards for her and trying to please her. I expressed how I felt, that he's trying to compete with me, and my mom right now is gloating in that. All he could say is, this is your mother, and you have obviously showed her you don't even care. My sisters are livid with me and have said that I'm a horrible daughter and could learn from my husband how to treat a parent. I feel like my boundaries have been completely violated. Not the jerk, not the jerk, not the jerk. What is with your husband? It's one thing for him to talk to her and send her cards or whatever, but moving her into your house against your express wishes is bananas. What's wrong with these "you're the jerk" commenters? You're absolutely right to feel like your boundaries have been completely violated. Not the jerk. He's absolutely the jerk for bringing your mother into your house without your permission. Your sisters are also the jerks for judging your daughterhood while they can hide behind their jobs and other excuses why mom isn't at their house. But your telling him apparently isn't going to do you a whole lot of good. All I can suggest is that you focus on caring for your kid and absolutely do no more than 25% of the care for your mother, with sisters and hubby doing the rest. And also, you should find time to get out of the house a few times a week, with or without your kid, to preserve your sanity. Grocery shopping doesn't count. I'm talking about a play date or coffee with a friend, a movie, a museum. Not the jerk. Everybody in this story just decided how your life is supposed to go. Your sisters and husband are total jerks. None of them are going to be responsible for taking care of a baby and a disabled parent. They all jumped to put all of that on you. First time one of the sisters doesn't show to help out, I'd pack up mom and take her right to their doorstep. The minute your husband gets home, he would have to assume all responsibility for mom's care. I'm not going to pass any judgment on whether or not you should want to take care of her. That's not the issue. All these people had no right to make this decision for you. Wow. I just wanted to comment that I'm amazed how many of you people in the West treat your parents and speak of them. It's honestly shocking. I'm absolutely perplexed at the lack of morale and character. This is foreign to the entire world except here apparently. Don't respect silly outsiders, and don't place idiotic celebrities on pedestals. Praise and respect your parents while you still can. I see a mother who cooks for the OP and her husband. a mother who invites them over for dinner often, a mother who treats her sister-in-law like a son. I see no mention of Opie being neglected when she was growing up. I see an ungrateful daughter who set selfish boundaries and turned her back on her mother when she is in physical pain and needs help. Unpopular opinion, but you're punishing your mom for showing extra care to your orphan husband, and you abandoned her when she needed you. I think you've taken it too far, beyond healthy boundaries, into jerk territory. You shouldn't have to do all the work for your mom, but you should be doing some. It's your mom, and she's been an amazing mother-in-law to your husband. Not everything needs to be about you. From what I read, you're the jerk. It's one thing to have your privacy and to do a schedule you both can agree on, but to do a cold turkey 180 on your mom is harsh. No Christmas and Thanksgiving, then she gets injured? You're free to think as you wish, but so is your husband. If he feels your reaction is wrong, imagine your kid growing up doing the same to you that you're doing to your mom. It's one thing if she was being a bad mother, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Again, I'm not saying nothing should be done to that situation, but you were too harsh on her. Her being upset is normal in my opinion, and your husband is not the issue. He's doing what a good human being would do in that situation. Edit. For the ones downvoting, go at it. If you feel she's right in the way that she did things, then that's that. You're the jerk. What is with Americans resenting your parents so much? What you've described as your husband doing is the bare minimum you should have been doing. What on earth? What's with this crappy idea that you don't owe your parents any care once you're an adult? Your parents are your family, and they should be. Not wanting to become a caregiver for someone who constantly micromanages and stomps over your boundaries is called being a human. Doesn't help that the rest of her family makes her shoulder the burden and gets mad when she's not okay with it. Did anyone even think about the issues regarding the baby in their house, lockdown, and the millions of other issues that come with a grown, injured human? No? Great, lovely. But OP's just a crappy, selfish daughter, right? Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her husband? Please let us know. Loving and respecting your parents is so 5 minutes ago. Join the Reddit revolution and tell your parents how little they mean to you today. That's messed up. My wife keeps throwing out good food, so I took it out of the trash can and cooked dinner with it. For context, my sister and I grew up relatively poor. When I was 6, our mom took a promotion and moved 3 hours away. We found out in our adult life she had been hoarding her money and giving our alcoholic father a small allowance to raise us. With his addiction problems, it left us minimal money for essentials. By the time I was 16, we were technically on our own and we were ransacking through dumpsters to feed ourselves. I'm now in my late 30s. I have a successful career and I live quite comfortably. My sister is also well off now. My wife and I have a great relationship. I've worked to stop some of my old habits from my upbringing. Some of my penny-pinching techniques, my wife graciously ignores and lets me save our money where I can. However, there's one issue we always can't find a compromise on. I can't handle when our food is thrown out. Our daughter, who's 12, wanted chickens last year. That ended up being a good idea, since our table scraps would go to them instead of being wasted for the trash. For the record, I hate when my wife shops at Costco. She buys too much stuff for our family, which creates a lot of waste. I've asked her to at least donate what we don't eat, or give it to me, and I can drop it off at a homeless shelter near my house. She promised to just buy less quantity, but that didn't last because she didn't like grocery shopping more than once a week. Last week I came home and I found a sealed pack of lettuce, 1 whole cucumber, and an entire loaf of bread and potatoes in the trash outside. The lettuce was expired, but it looked fine. The bread was also expired, but it had no mold. The potatoes had eyes, but weren't green or rotten yet. So I went inside and started cooking on dinner. I grilled chicken, which was the only item not from the trash. I made a salad and I added the cucumber, used the bread to make croutons, and finally I made mashed potatoes. We all sat down to eat. My wife mentioned how great the food was. I told her it was the food that she had thrown out earlier that day. She was completely mortified and grossed out. I told her I washed everything off before cooking it, but she said that it didn't matter. My point was, if the food was good enough for us to eat, it should not have been thrown out. At bare minimum, she could have given it to our daughter to take to the chickens. She argued back that I should have taken it from the trash and given it to the chickens, not our table. She was irritated with me, fearing we all would have food poisoning or something, but none of us got sick from the food. She said regardless, it was wrong for me to prove a point in that manner, And horrible of me to serve the family food from the trash. I don't really see what I did wrong. There are people starving in this world, and for us to just throw out perfectly fine food, it just doesn't sit right with me. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk. You need to find ways for you to heal from your childhood issues without digging food out of the trash. Just because you were okay this time doesn't mean that wasn't a bad decision, especially feeding it to your family without their approval. Everyone sucks here because it's clear from throwing out unused, unopened items that the wife is buying more than they need and throwing it out instead of donating it. Food waste is unacceptable. Having seen the news reports of activists who pull out pounds and pounds of perfectly good food from grocery store trash bins, I'm unable to say whether what Opie did was dangerous or not. But even if it was, that doesn't make buying too much food and throwing it out instead of donating it okay. Not the jerk. Food waste is outrageous in first world countries. And lettuce with an expired date? Lettuce doesn't expire in a particular date, it just gets rotten. Your wife should be more conscious of foods. I can't believe she'd rather throw food away knowing that you used to be a hungry kid and eat from the trash than making an effort to do a better shopping list. Well, who do you think is the jerk? Opie or his wife? Please let us know. Principal asked everyone to be 30 minutes early for the exam. Really ends up regretting it. I'm a teacher. The principal we had at our school was the kind who got to her position because it was a way to escape teaching students. She was a teacher before taking the exam to be principal, which is common, and to flaunt the little authority that it got her. One of the issues I had with her was about punctuality. She was especially strict about it, which would have been fine if she weren't herself systematically late to everything. I loathe hypocrites, and it makes our job especially difficult to ask students to be on time in classes when the principal was half an hour late to a meeting that she had scheduled herself with their parents. Come the end of the year, and with it, time for the baccalaureate, final exam for high schoolers in my country. The students start to receive their instructions for the exam week. When we see the instructions, we're already upset because the time is wrong, on purpose. It would tell a student that they had to be there at 7:30 for a 4-hour test without even telling them that the test is actually scheduled to start at 8 and ends at noon. A few days later, the teachers received their own instructions to monitor the tests. It's normal to get them after the students, though it was particularly late this year. For us, the scheduled time of the test is correct, but it was mentioned on each of our instructions that we had to be present 30 minutes before the start of each test. I mean, we aren't going to be present at 8 exactly if the test is scheduled to start at that time. We don't want to do the students over. We need a few minutes to get the test papers and let the students in the classroom so that we can start exactly on time. But 5 minutes is enough, 10 at most. And as teachers, we're used to being there slightly before class starts anyway. Most of us simply ignored her and came to the exam on time as usual. But a dozen of us decided to comply, and we sent her emails tallying up the total numbers of hours that we'd be working that week, adding that half hour before each test. She answered with some BS that our tallies were wrong because she wasn't counting the half hour. We let that pass. We complied, and my colleagues declared their overtime. In the end, that came to about 30 hours of overtime total for doing basically nothing that had to be paid. She also did not seem to realize that my email was slightly different than that of my colleagues. For me, it's a bit different because I work part-time. As such, I'm not allowed to do overtime. Come Friday, I sent her a new email, reminding her about the upcoming issue. No answers. The last 4-hour test of the week starts at 1 p.m. At 2:25, I asked my colleague monitoring the next room over, who was in on the plan, to cover for me for 5 minutes. There's a door between the exam rooms. We can stand there and watch both rooms to let the other take a bathroom break or something like that. I go to the principal's office. I remind her that there's a room full of students with 2.5 hours left, and I don't know if she's scheduled someone to take over for me, but I've already done all of my hours for this week, and since I'm not allowed to do overtime, I'm leaving. Now, as a teacher, I take pride in my punctuality and my ability to finish my speech exactly on time. I also purposefully timed this one. Just after I told her I was leaving, I look at my watch. It's 3 seconds to 2:30. I look at her face while she just gathers her thoughts. In 3 seconds, she went from confusion to realization to anger, and just as she's about to answer, it's time. So I turn around and I walk away. "What are you doing? Stay here. We're not finished." I answer without looking back. "Sorry, it's 2:30. My work is done. I'm not being paid to listen to you." I leave while I hear her half-coherent threats. She followed me, of course, but couldn't really talk loudly in the corridors while the exam was taking place. Plus, she still knows that loudly berating a teacher in public in full view and hearing of students would be extremely unprofessional, and she's the one who'd get in trouble for that. More importantly, I know where I'm going. I pass in front of the classroom I was monitoring in earlier. I thank my colleague, point at the principal, who's just catching up, red as a beet, and tell him, "I brought you the principal." I leave as he greets her, thus intercepting her from me. I learned that she had to monitor the students herself, which must have really upset her because she leaves early on Fridays. Next week, obviously, she requested that we have a talk in her office. I went with my union representative. We explained to her that it was not difficult to prove that she was the one in the wrong, and that if she wanted to escalate the issue, we would have no problem getting it to the administrative tribunal. My union representative also made the open threat of a strike that I and those who declared their overtime had the support of the union and teaching staff. Am I the jerk for leaving a birthday party because I couldn't eat my food inside? My friend group had a surprise party for one of our friends last night. Kim offered to host the party at her house and to make the food for it. The rest of us would just show up right after getting off work to decorate and set up. Kim is vegan, which is fine and dandy. The only problem is I have a soy allergy. Kim knows about this. I never expect her to go out of her way to alter what she makes for my sake. There's just an agreement between us that it's not very often I can eat what she makes because she uses a lot of soy-based condiments and substitutes. However, since this was a party taking place after work and was supposed to last a while, I asked Kim if she could hold off on certain legumes and the like, and at least one thing that she makes so that I could eat while at the party. She said she would try. For my part, I packed myself an extra lunch to keep in a cooler throughout the day. It didn't consist of any meat, but there were eggs and items made with mayo or yogurt. I intended to eat it before the party started while decorating, but I wasn't hungry at that point. Once the party started, I did munch on some cut-up vegetables, but they weren't cutting it, and I got really hungry. Kim had made 2 things of mashed potatoes, but she couldn't remember which bowl had been made with soy milk and which had been made with almond milk. I went out to my car and brought my pack inside so I could eat something. Kim came over to me and said that she could smell the mayo and told me to go eat in my car, that she was fine that I wasn't eating what she had made, but I knew she has a vegan household and doesn't allow non-vegan foods inside. Mind you, it's January, nighttime, and really cold outside. I wasn't going to argue with her because it was her house and I didn't want to ruin the party by addressing the issue right there. But I also didn't want to have to speed eat while sitting in my car or make frequent trips outside just to snack. So I said goodbye to our friend whose birthday party it was and I left. A couple hours later, I started getting a bunch of texts asking why I had left so early in the night. I said it was because I was hungry, but some of our friends kept pushing because they had seen me come inside with my pack after saying I was grabbing food, so I was honest with them that it was because Kim told me to go eat in my car. Some of our friends are split now and think Kim should have been willing to be flexible since it was at night and really cold outside, and others are siding with her. Kim is just mad and thinks I started drama on purpose. Am I the jerk for leaving after she told me to go eat in my car? Not the jerk. And she's one of the reasons that vegans have such a bad rep. It's not rocket science to prepare at least one dish that you can eat, and to remember which dish that was. You know, put a Post-it on it, put a purple spoon, something, or, make everything with almond milk instead of soy milk for one night. Not the jerk. I understand not wanting non-vegan foods in her home, but Kim isn't a good host or a good friend. You remain tactful and tried to save face for Kim, but she really did herself in by brushing you off without a second thought. Well, who do you think is the jerk? Opie or Kim? Please let us know. I would have been petty and gone to get some McDoubles, come back and eat them in front of her and refuse to leave. McDonald's, yes. I'd like to speak with your manager. Not a problem. A few years ago, I was working casual as a bar manager at a major sports stadium after my housemate, who was running the corporate dining, hooked me up with a job as a nice little side earner. The role was pretty straightforward. Turn up, set up the bar, serve beers and snacks, clean up the bar, go home. This made it ideal for uni students, particularly international students who could pick up 3 to 5 hour shifts without it causing too much disruption to their studies. While the 5 to 6 staff I managed were continually changing individually, it was mostly Indian international students, as well as the same colleague, Anoop, week in, week out, who was invaluable at keeping the show running. Given my housemate and I lived together, and he had hooked me up with a job, I was happy to take on a new person or two per shift who never worked in a bar setting before to give them a quick rundown on pouring beer, using the register, etc. If it was one trainee, I'd pair them up with me. 2 trainees, I'd pair the second one up with a noob. The bar was a members-only bar that had its own private room that came as a perk of the $800 membership people were paying to the sports club each year. It meant, along with getting beer in real glassware rather than plastic, that the queues were also much shorter as well, and there were usually a few ex-players kicking around to give the odd speech. During one particular shift, just after the game started, I was doing my thing at one end of the bar when a noob came up to me and said that there was an issue at one of the registers. I went over to see, and the young student there told me that the patron standing opposite the bar had mocked her accent when she tried to explain to him she was still learning how to use the register. The guy looked at me and said he just wants a beer. Summing the situation up quickly, I leaned into a tool that I had learned from my housemate. Sorry, based on what my staff member had just told me, you made a comment making fun of her accent. I'd like to believe that that's a comment you wouldn't normally make, which leads me to believe you must be intoxicated. I'm not able to serve you anymore tonight. However, I'd be happy to serve your friends, but they will only be able to buy 1 drink at a time. Needless to say, he wasn't happy with this, and after a couple of minutes back and forth, he asked to speak with someone else about the issue. Absolutely, not an issue, I said, and asked a noob to quickly go off and find the corporate dining manager. After 5 minutes or so of waiting, the game has restarted at this point, so our patron is now missing the game as well. The corporate dining manager, aka my housemate, arrives wearing his lanyard, suit, polished shoes, etc. I give him a quick summary. The guy pleads his case that he should be allowed to keep drinking here because he's a member and he's paid good money to be there. My housemate hears him out and then says, "Based on what my staff member has told me, you've made a comment towards a member of my team which is inappropriate, and he's made the right decision to prohibit you from buying any more alcohol at the bar. However, given you've argued that point and your friends here haven't stopped you from doing so, it leads me to believe that all of you are intoxicated, which means, unfortunately, none of you will be able to be served at this bar for the rest of the night. If you'll excuse me, I'll need to go get back to the corporate suites, and if there's any further issues, we'll have to get security," points to guy standing at the door who checks everyone's membership card before you enter, to escort you out. With that, he turns and leaves. The crappy patron and his friends take the L and ask me where the nearest retail outlet is that serves beer. Not a problem. We're on level 3 at the moment, so you'll need to take the 2 flights of stairs down to level 2, and then take 1 left and wander past the food, merch, and toilets, and it will be on your left-hand side. Given their seats were on level 3, that's a fairly decent walk to complete several times throughout the game, and I'd like to think it gave them time to pause and reflect. However, I suspect that wasn't the case. Am I the jerk for taking up space at a restaurant? I, 27 male, often go out to eat alone. It's never an issue for me since I'm usually sat at bars or at a table for 2. Recently, I wanted to go to a new place that had opened in the area. I went alone, and the hostess led me to a table for 4. I asked if they had smaller tables or a bar to sit at, since I didn't want to take up a spot for larger groups. She said this was their smallest table and they don't do bar seating. The restaurant wasn't super busy, but definitely picking up as it was dinner time. While I was waiting on my food, the attendance picked up big time, and there were people sitting outside waiting. I noticed at the host stand an older woman, a man, 2 younger adults, and a kid were crowded around, and the woman pointed directly at me. I tried to ignore it since my food was about to come out. While I was eating, the group from earlier were sat in a booth not far from me. The lady who pointed at me made a loud comment about how selfish young people can be, how some people are so entitled they take things away from others without a care. Then I felt something hit my neck. It was a waddled up straw wrapper. I turned to look where it came from and noticed everyone at that table was glaring at me except the kid, who was oblivious. I wouldn't say I have social anxiety, but I am non-confrontational, so I went back to my food. Then the unthinkable happened. The lady came over and asked for one of those chairs at my table, saying they squeezed 5 into a booth and just wanted a chair for the kid. Before I could get an answer out, since I was chewing, a server walked by. "Oh no, ma'am, we can't have chairs moved around. Safety with the walkways."
"Well, why does one person need 3 extra chairs? I have a kid suffering, and his parents are horribly uncomfortable because you set one guy at a table when you could have just given him his food to go."
The server then told her that she needed to sit back down, but she kept ranting.
"Oh, I'd love to sit comfortably at a table too big for me. It must be so nice knowing I'm ruining another family's dinner.
At this point, the hostess interjected and the server left. The hostess tried to shoo her back to her table, but the lady kept demanding an extra chair. Ma'am, you told us to sit you in the first table that opened. The manager and I told you that it would be a squeeze, and you still wanted it. Either you take this table or you can leave. The lady finally grumbled her way back to sitting, and I finished my meal, paid, and I got out of there. She was definitely unhinged, but I'm stuck wondering if I'm the jerk here for taking up a space meant for more people. Not the jerk. The hostess knew you were alone and sat you at a foretop because they don't have two-seat tables or bar seating. They can't reasonably turn you away for being alone or force you to have takeout. The family squeezed into a booth was in the wrong before throwing the waddled-up straw wrapper at you. No, not the jerk. You asked for a smaller space and did your due diligence to try and accommodate others. If the restaurant couldn't seat you somewhere smaller, that's on them. You shouldn't be punished for eating alone. Pull the door logs? Forget you. Pay me. I've done cleared contract work for more than 20 years. One downside of cleared work is that there is no sneaking in late or out early as everything is logged. A few years ago, I discovered that one upside is also that everything is logged. I was hired onto a 5-year contract, and for the first 4, everything was fine. I rode the train to work, did my required 40 hours, went home, and had no problems. Into year 5, the same thing happens that always happens in contracts. People start to leave. This isn't unusual, as the end of a contract holds some uncertainty, so people will find another new contract to move on to so they don't have to worry about it. Unfortunately, the immediate effect is that the workload shifts to the people that stay and things start to slip. Why not hire more people? Nobody wants to come onto a contract that's in its last year. Well, on this contract I stayed because I liked the customer and intended to ride out the final year shenanigans. Things started to fall behind. We were down from 15 engineers to 5, and the customer complained that the company was not meeting their contractual obligation. What did the company do to fix this? Offer hiring bonuses? Pay overtime? Make lucrative offers for people to stay? No. They called in their "everybody is inherently lazy" boomer project manager to handle things. From day one, Boomer Manager tells everyone that our lack of progress by 5 people on more than 100 active projects is simply a time management issue, and he threatens to pull the door logs to see who's actually at work for 8 hours a day. I figured he was bluffing, and I didn't worry because having been on the train schedule for 4 years, I knew that every day I was in the building from 7 to 4, except for occasionally walking down the street to grab lunch. The key point here is that being a contractor, I couldn't work overtime without authorization. So for 4 years, I had just put 40 hours a week on my timesheet. You may see where this is going. The fateful day comes when manager actually pulls the door logs and 2 of our engineers get a talking to about their time in the building and how claiming 40 hours without being there for 40 is fraud. I was upset by this because everybody that was left was working very hard, and the 2 guys manager had confronted had been working on COOP projects for our offsite location for years. So unless he pulled those logs as well, he didn't, they would be short. So what did I do? I stopped by manager's office and asked what my door totals were. He told me I was fine and not to worry about it. I told him I just wanted to be sure my time in matched my timesheet, as I didn't want to get caught in timesheet fraud. Again, he said not to worry about it, so I headed down to see my buddy Tony in security, and he pulled my logs for me. Next week, I walked into manager's office, closed the door, and told him I had a problem. I had pulled my door logs, and over the last 4 years, I had averaged almost 44 hours a week in the office, but had only ever charged 40. I had almost 800 hours of unreported labor and didn't know what to do about that. He told me not to worry about it, it wasn't a big deal. Next step, I contacted our company rep and explained the situation to her. She did not think it wasn't a big deal. In the end, I signed an NDA, but manager got removed from his role. I bought our whole team beers and lunch, and a memo went out to the team telling us specifically to charge what we worked, even if it had some overtime. Edit. My pay rate at the time was about $60 an hour, putting this shortage at just shy of $50,000. Yup, sure. Don't listen to the guy who operates the machinery. So I work in a metal fabrication plant. We build all sorts of stuff there, but mostly we build elevator and farming equipment parts. I'm stationed in the finishing department, where we do powder coating, and my job is to operate a large industrial oven that melts the powder coat into a solid coat. However, our system is subpar at best. There are so many little things wrong with everything that, if fixed, would make our whole area so much more efficient. One problem we constantly keep running into is cross-contamination. Part A is supposed to be X color, but because Part B was also being coated with Y color, they both came out of the oven all speckled and gross. Some companies we work with couldn't care less, but we have two companies who are really picky about how the parts look when they're finished. One day we had come in for overtime on a Saturday, and I noticed that the speckle problem was especially bad, and so I started looking for the cause. As all of those parts now had to be redone, and the goal of catching up for the next week had now been ruined. At first, I thought my oven was dirty, but that couldn't have been it because I cleaned it that morning and had done a thorough deep clean a few days prior. Then I thought maybe the parts had been sitting inside the oven for too long while I waited for space to put them in, but that typically wasn't an issue, so I put that one on hold. Then I thought maybe I had put them too close together, so I decided to let one color cycle all the way through the oven before putting in the next color, but it still came out speckled. At this point, I knew it couldn't have been something I was doing wrong, so I went over to the powder coating area to investigate, and I immediately found the problem. They were using both booths at the same time, coating two different colors, and there was an air current blowing yellow powder into the black powder booth. Mystery solved. I immediately notified my supervisor about what was happening and told her we probably shouldn't be coating two different colors at the same time because all of the parts are coming out bad. But she told me that there was no way that was the issue and that it had to be something that I was doing wrong. But I had just checked everything that had previously been a cause of speckles, and I knew for a fact that this couldn't be the case. So I hatched up a plan. I waited until the oven was completely empty again, and I pulled her aside and said, "All right, you see that? The oven is completely empty, and you watched me clean it this morning. So you and I are going to do a little wager. I bet you this week's entire paycheck that even though there are absolutely no yellow parts currently inside that oven, that these black parts are going to come out yellow anyways, and they'll be coming straight from the booth. They won't be sitting out exposed to any debris. They'll just go straight in, and they'll still be yellow anyways." She thought this idea was absolutely ridiculous and saw absolutely no reason how she could ever be wrong, despite the fact that she knows nothing about how the oven system works, and she took the bet. 45 minutes later, the parts came out, and what do you know? The black came out yellow. Turns out that sometimes the people who operate the machinery know more about said machinery than those who have never even touched it. If you want to change companies, don't let the door hit you on the way out. I work at a small company delivering potable water to people who don't have access to either city water or a private well. So we deliver to the same customers pretty much every week. Some customers are great and go out of their way to make deliveries easier, or at least make sure that they don't make them any more difficult than they have to be. A few customers just don't give a hoot and expect us to make deliveries no matter what they do to make things inconvenient. Recently, one customer over the last couple of years had made several changes to their property that made making deliveries significantly more difficult. I had spoken to my boss about them, and he laid out the conditions that would need to be met before he would consider dropping a paying customer, and they were literally just barely within the limits. And to their credit, they did keep up with their bills. I dreaded seeing their name on the delivery list every other week. Then they changed to wanting deliveries every week because their kids were moving into the house as well. After that, payments started being more sporadic. The checks we were getting changed names from the homeowner to their daughter. My boss only takes cash or check, not credit cards, as he feels no compulsion to give any money to credit card companies or to increase prices and pass the cost on to the customer. One day while I was in the office doing some end-of-day tasks, the phone rang. Caller ID was this problem customer. Boss answers and I eavesdrop. It was the daughter. She wanted to start paying by credit card. Boss said no. Then she decided to drop her threat to change companies. Such hope in my heart as I saw the boss's face turn red. He hates bullies and being bullied. Boss immediately agrees that that would be the best and hangs up on her. Walks over to the delivery schedule calendar and crosses their name off of the list. 2 days later, I got called into the office to hear a message left by the daughter begging us to make deliveries again. She apologized and everything. Turns out she had discovered that we were by far the cheapest option for them. One of the things that made them frustrating to deliver to was not just the physical difficulty of the delivery, but they only had a 350-gallon holding tank. It was a lot of work and time to deliver such a small amount of water, and we have the lowest minimum delivery rate in town. While all of the companies around town are at about the same price per gallon, most other companies have an 800-gallon minimum delivery rate, while our minimum at the time was only 500 gallons. The boss and I shared a chuckle over the call. I don't believe he ever bothered with calling her back. Am I the jerk for telling my friend the length she is going to interfere with my marriage is unhealthy? My oldest friend's wife, Olive, used to be my good friend too a few years back. Then we drifted apart, and later she became close friends with my wife, Natalie. Olive has a lot of issues with our marriage for some reason, and she tries to influence Natalie a lot. Her biggest issue is with how Natalie and I handle our finances. Natalie has a history of making bad financial decisions and racking up credit card debt. For that reason, she does not have access to my savings account. I make 3 times as much as Natalie, and she's terrible at saving money, so almost all of the money in the savings account was put there by me. Despite this, I think of that money as both of ours, and one day it will go towards the purchase of our shared home. For some mysterious reason, Natalie told Olive all about our finances during a night of drinking, and Olive has been obsessed with it since. She told Natalie she should demand access to the savings account, spend as much as she wants to on clothes, etc. I really don't think it's an accident that after every single night out, Natalie starts a fight with me about our finances, especially since Natalie brought up how Olive and her husband do their finances in a much better way. Now on to the point. I have a fully remote job at a foreign company that pays way better than the ones in my country. I alone make more in a month than my friend and Olive together. Just 1.5 months ago, Olive managed to get a full remote job like mine too. So naturally, now she's trying to act like a role model I should follow and tells my wife things like, "Now I make 3 times as much as my husband, but he has access to every penny. Natalie, this is what you and your husband should do too. You should demand it." And Natalie told me this. I messaged Olive and I told her to stop. She told me that if I don't like that she's helping Natalie build some standards and making her question things, maybe I could try being a better husband to her. I replied that her obsession with my marriage is unhealthy, and going out of her way and interviewing to dozens of foreign companies just to be able to interfere with my marriage even more is really insane. She then said I was showing symptoms of paranoia and I should seek psychiatric help. It's Natalie who comes to her for advice on our marriage, and she only answers her. Yeah, that's a load of BS. I know Olive. I know she becomes obsessed with things and keeps pushing until she gets what she wants. I know I'm right. But maybe my approach was wrong, and I should have invited her to a coffee or something first and asked her to stop in a more cultured manner. On the other hand, she's really acting insane. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. This is also way beyond am I the jerk's pay grade. You need to sit down and have apparently several conversations with your wife, a handful about money management, a couple about why you keep a separate account, and a few about not inviting outsiders into your marital decisions. Not the jerk. But it seems a lengthy conversation with your wife is in order. Does she know why you keep the money in a different account? Does she know how you feel about her friend? Based on how you wrote the post, it feels like you're trying to avoid your wife altogether, while she should be the first person you talk to and make your point clear to. You should, however, stop being bullheaded and not be 100% sure you're right when going into that conversation. In a marriage, you often have to meet in the middle and find a consensus. Otherwise, I doubt it will last much longer. I say you're the jerk because, and I don't know Olive obviously, but it's very possible that your wife is confiding in her. After all, you literally wrote, "For some mysterious reason, Natalie told Olive all about our finances during a night of drinking." Perhaps it's no mysterious reason. Perhaps it was her feeling upset about the financial situation and feeling loose with alcohol among a friend, and that Olive is simply giving your wife her perspective and advice when she does, especially because you said that arguments only happen when they go out together. You may wish to talk to your wife about how she feels before completely dismissing the fact that she may have some dissatisfaction with the way you handle your money and begrudging Olive and accusing her of interfering with your marriage. Well, who do you think is the jerk? Opie or Olive? Please let us know. My mom is demanding that I pay for her surgery. I, 35 female, lost my father very early in life when I was only 5 years old. A few months after his passing, my mother married a guy named John. John already had 2 teenage sons, and he didn't want to raise me because he never wanted to be a girl's father. My mother, like a good mother, abandoned me with my aunt and took my brother, who was 8 at this time, with her to live with her husband. John was a man with a lot of money, and he always spoiled my mother and brother, but he never bothered to get me even a Christmas present. My mother didn't do anything for me either. She came to visit me once a month and didn't even call me on Christmas or New Year. I always called, but many times she didn't answer. My aunt was a woman who couldn't have kids. Because of that, she and my uncle raised me as if I were their own daughter, not missing anything for me. Even without much money, I accumulated some money from my job I had during high school, and I earned a small amount from my aunt, which was enough for me to pay my way for college. At the time, I graduated in computer science and went to work in a good company, earning a great salary. But 8 years ago, I received a much better job offer from a large company, one well known for having great hardware products. In that time, I accumulated a lot of money and helped my uncle and aunt renovate their house, and I always sent them a nice amount, even if they told me to spend it on myself. I currently live alone in a great apartment with an estimated value in the millions. Recently, my mom called me on Instagram. I post a lot of pictures of trips and fancy places that I go. It's not too hard to find me. She asked if we could meet and talk and reevaluate our relationship to forget the past and move forward as mother and daughter. I have a soft heart, so I took it. I thought it would be an opportunity for us to talk and finally create the bond that I had always wanted. We made an appointment at a restaurant downtown and we met there. When we got there, she hugged me, kissed me on the cheek, and said she missed me. We talked about my life, and when I asked how hers was going, she started to talk about how bad she was. Apparently, she divorced John, and my brother didn't want to keep her as she is now poor. To make matters worse, she lives on a pension from John and has serious heart problems. After a while, she asked if I could pay for a surgery she needed. The surgery was quite expensive, quite a lot. I told her I wouldn't pay, as I wouldn't feel good doing that. She yelled at me in the middle of the restaurant, said I was a terrible daughter, and that I was letting this happen to her even though I could pay for her surgery. I left there, very embarrassed. When I told my aunt, she said it was my decision, but remarked that I do have plenty of money to pay and that it wouldn't affect me financially. I don't want to do this because she was never even an actual mom to me, but I need to ask, am I the jerk? Not the jerk. She abandoned you. You don't owe her a thing. I'm calling BS on the heart problems, by the way. The fact that she abandoned one of her kids demonstrates that she has no heart. You're better off without her. Not the jerk. Today it's surgery. Tomorrow it will be recovery, then rent, bills, lifestyle, vacations, then home care. And you will end up restricting your lifestyle for someone who threw you away so she could have the lifestyle she wanted. If she pops up again, tell her you're saving your money to help the people who raised you. You owe her nothing. Pay for 20 hours of work? Get 20 hours of work. I'll begin by saying I work for a software company. I was working on a project for a client to customize part of the software and stuff. The project was very open-ended, mostly because the client kept changing their mind about what they wanted. So the contract was time and materials, meaning that I had an hourly rate. I would log all the time worked on the project in half-hour intervals, and every week my company would bill the client company for the hours spent on the project. The client said they didn't care how much effort it took. They wanted a good product and they wanted it before the end of the year, so they could present it at their big internal meeting. At the beginning, the project went great. Every week I had a meeting with the client and I would get feedback on the progress, as well as new requests they might have, and then I'd spend however long it took to implement the changes. I'd bill them 15 hours, 20 hours, 25 hours, or however many it had been. Slowly, over time, the client started requesting more and more. I told them during the meeting, this feature will require this many days of work. Changing that will require Y more days, and so on. But again, the client insisted that they needed all these extra features. They also complained that the company wasn't advancing quickly enough and insisted they needed the project completed before the end of the year. I talked to my manager and explained the situation. To be able to finish quickly enough, I needed to work full-time on this project. My manager moved my other projects to different people, and we told the client that until the end of the year, I would work full-time on the project to ensure that we would hit all of the deadlines. The client was overjoyed for about a month. The following month, the client is upset and is demanding to know why we're charging them so much. I pull out my timesheets and explain that, as agreed, I've been working full-time and more on their project. Every week, I've logged between 45 and 50 hours of work, and I've detailed notes specifying exactly how I've spent that time. I'm not exactly concerned about being accused of stealing time because I'm a fast worker, and most tasks have been completed more quickly than the original estimates. Besides, I point out that I'm now working twice as many hours as before, so it's costing the client twice as much per week. But I'm also completing tasks twice as quickly and will be finished in half the time. The client, unfortunately, doesn't appreciate my use of logical reasoning. They accuse my company of taking advantage, and then they say that starting from next week, they no longer want to pay me for more than 20 hours of work per week. I tell them, sure, we can do that, but it's October already, and you want the project complete by the end of the year. Given the amount of work still left to do, I will need more hours to finish. The client doesn't let me explain and says that we're not to bill them for anything more than 20 hours per week. They will not pay us for more than 20 hours per week, and that they want this in writing or they'll cancel the entire project. As my manager says, of course, the customer is always right. This was an evil act of malicious compliance, so please read until the end before getting angry at my manager. He's a great guy. So my manager sends the client an email confirming that, starting from this date, my engagement with them will be capped at a maximum of 20 hours per week. He also attaches a spreadsheet of the estimated time to develop all of the new features of the project, how many hours I had spent so far, and how many hours I projected to spend to complete it. The client smugly acknowledges this. Before the end of the week, my manager gives me back my other project, as well as a new one. You see, at the time we were understaffed because we were growing too quickly, and we were getting more requests for new projects that we could handle. So there would have been no point in stealing hours from this client and upsetting them when we could take on a couple of new clients instead and bill everyone for the actual work and keep everyone happy. So starting from next week, my new schedule is 20 hours with the crappy client, 10 hours with client B, and 15 hours with client C. It works great for me. It doesn't work that great for the crappy client. At our next weekly meeting, one of the features they requested isn't ready yet. At the following meeting, I tell them we'll need to move the deadline for the next milestone by 2 weeks. Then it's the beginning of December, and they ask me if I would be able to make some last-minute changes and still deliver the product by the end of the year. And I say, oh, there's no way this project can be finished by the end of the year. We have yet another meeting with the client and my manager. My manager asks me why I'm missing this huge deadline. I say, do you remember when I was talking about all of the work that still needed to be done and how long it would take? In October, we estimated the project needed another 60 days of work. I worked 10 days in October and 10 days in November, because you said 20 hours max per week. It's going to take about 40 more days of work to finish the project. It's December. Even if I work overtime, there are not 40 days left before the end of the year. Manager is like, yep, makes perfect sense. Client does this shocked Pikachu face. They act like this is the first time they've heard about not being able to meet the deadlines, even though I've been telling them for weeks. Unfortunately, they're the kind of person who never listens to what they don't want to hear. At first, they wanted the work done quickly, so they didn't think that if I worked more hours, I would bill them for more hours. Then they wanted to be billed for fewer hours, so they didn't consider that I would work fewer hours on the project and things would get done much more slowly. Unfortunately for the client, who would like to pretend that we were springing this on them at the last minute, we had tons of emails to show we had told them well in advance. My manager's email back in October had even included an estimate of when the project would be complete based on number of hours worked per week. We were well and truly covered. Now for the fallback. The client kicked and screamed and demanded that I go back to work on their project full-time, or even that my company should provide a second person to help me meet the deadline at the end of the year. It's January and the project is still unfinished, so you can guess how well that went. Client had to move the big presentation of the new software and was not happy about it, and about having to explain it all to their own CEO. But we told them very nicely in corporate tones to buzz off. I was already scheduled to work on 2 other projects for the next few months, and it had been hard enough to put me full-time on this project the first time. My manager is not going to leave another 2 clients hanging, especially not to please this crappy client who keeps changing their mind and threatens to cancel their contract every other week. As a company, we do our best to keep the client happy, but there's a limit to everything, especially when someone goes out of their way to not listen when we try to explain how cause and effect works. My sister wouldn't let my girlfriend eat, and now she's sick. I'm 32, male. My girlfriend, 31, female, Anne, of 4 years, has a condition where if she's hungry, she has to eat something or a snack. Otherwise, she will become very sick and throw up. She's seeing a doctor about it, However, the doctor said it's hard to treat it, as it's her body's response from back when she was dealing with an eating disorder, which was before we started dating. In general, this condition is manageable, and she always has snacks with her in case she feels hungry, and both of us make sure that they're always available. A lot of these snacks are healthy, like dried peas, meat chips, fruits, etc. Last weekend, my sister invited us and the rest of the family for breakfast, as she had some news to announce. She lives in a country house quite a distance away from the shops. She has also asked me and Anne not to bring any snacks since she felt it was disrespectful and caused trouble with her kids. I reminded my sister that Anne has a medical condition and can't go hungry, to which my sister assured us there will be food when we arrive and it will be ready to eat. Last time it wasn't the case, and the food wasn't ready until 4 hours after, which is why Anne had to snack on her dried fruits. We agreed and arrived in the morning as promised to help my sister. Anne had some fruits for breakfast and coffee. There was no food available, but plenty of snacks like nuts, cheese, and fruits. So when Anne got hungry, and as she didn't have any snacks and the hot food was not ready, she asked my sister if she can snack on the cold food. My sister was not happy about it and started shouting at Anne, calling her childish for wanting to eat, and she can wait for the hot food since our kids are patiently waiting. I've reminded my sister that Anne has a condition and cannot go long times without food, but my sister refused to budge. As my car was blocked by my brother-in-law's car due to tight parking, I've asked him to move so that we can go to the shop and get something. But my sister said no, as she needs my brother-in-law around to help her, and we can just wait until the food is ready. Unfortunately, this delay caused Anne to get sick, so we had to leave soon after the food was ready, as she wasn't feeling well and started to throw up. My sister told me that we behaved like jerks and we ruined her announcement, and that Anne was clearly being sick for attention since she wasn't getting any that day. I've reminded her again about Anne's condition, what she said earlier about food being available, and said she behaved spoiled and her actions were harsh towards Anne. She should have just let her snack, so she will not be seeing me or her around until she apologizes. However, since then I keep getting messages from my brother-in-law's family calling me a jerk. Not the jerk. Clearly your sister is at fault here, and you should be going no contact with her. Ignore brother-in-law's family, as they're only hearing her version of what happened from your sister. Tell brother-in-law exactly what happened. Your sister is a jerk and caused your girlfriend to get sick. Opie should explain it to anyone and everyone his sister tells. Your sister is being terrible, like beyond terrible, not the jerk. Would I be the jerk for hiding my pregnancy from my mother-in-law? I'm female, 28. My husband, who's 29, his mother is extremely involved in her kids' lives. Essentially, she believes that she has a say in everything since they're her kids. We do love her, but she can be a lot. Lots of unsolicited advice, pushy opinions, etc. We started to notice that she's been extremely gossipy, particularly about things that should not be shared. For example, we were told of a cousin's pregnancy having birth defects, but we were told not to tell anyone because she wasn't supposed to tell anyone. Another cousin was pregnant and ultimately miscarried, but this wasn't announced, so we've had to act like we don't know. Another cousin got pregnant but didn't want anyone to know as it was early. Her mom told my mother-in-law, her sister-in-law, and my mother-in-law told us. Again, we were told to act like we didn't know this. Luckily, everything is on track with that one. I mentioned that I hoped that when the day came for me to announce my own pregnancy, she would not tell others, as it's something that my husband and I should enjoy and do ourselves. She said, "It doesn't matter, because no one would tell you, they already knew, so it would be just as special to you." I realized then and there that nothing we could do or say would prevent her from spreading the word before we were ready, and my husband agreed. Now we found out that we're expecting our first, and we're very excited. We're only 6 weeks into the pregnancy. I expressed a desire to not tell his mother until 12 weeks, and that I'd essentially like to tell her and then post it online within the hour. He was okay with that plan. However, I do want to tell my 2 sisters and my mother and father. They're extremely supportive people, and I want to share this time with them. I would never worry about them telling anyone. He thinks that it would be wrong to tell my family and not his own, and his mother would never forgive us. Me, really. I said that his mother's inability to stop gossiping shouldn't prevent me from sharing with my family. I also said that he can tell his sister if he would like, as I know for a fact that she'll keep it a secret from her mom. She shared many of the same concerns. He said this is asking for problems because his mom will inevitably find out later that everyone knew before her. I agree that she will likely find that out, But I don't think that's our problem, and she should understand why we kept it from her. His father would never side with us to keep the peace, but definitely understands why we would do this. Would I be the jerk for hiding this from his mother, but telling others in our family? Not the jerk. Go ahead and tell your family. When your mother-in-law finds out later she was the last to know and explodes, just calmly tell her. It doesn't matter, because no one told you they already knew, so it would be just as special to you. Am I the jerk for making my son pay his own living expenses if he insists on his mother living with him in my house? My ex and I did not have an amicable divorce. I'll get that out of the way. When my parents decided to move to a retirement village, they passed their house on to me. The house is a 35-minute drive from where my son, Alex, 22 male, is currently attending school. To help him out so he could just focus on school, I told him he could live there while he's in school and just work part-time. I pay for the utilities, maintenance, property tax, etc. His car insurance, phone, and plan are already paid for by me. I had 3 rules for him. 1. Keep the house, front, and backyards clean and mowed. 2. Don't move anyone in without talking to me about it first. 3. He's responsible for his own groceries, gas, and fun money. Recently, I was in town and swung by the house to visit, and when Alex opened the door, he had that deer in the headlights look. No one other than my ex-wife visible down the hall in, I assume, pajamas. Long story short, she's been living with him for the last 4 months. She had to switch jobs and took a big pay cut. I knew he had been working on his relationship with her the last few years, but I didn't realize that much. My initial reaction was to tell her to get her crap and get out of my house, but not only had she been there since long enough it would require an eviction process, and I know she's spiteful enough to make it costly, but she isn't worth completely losing my relationship with Alex over by tossing her out. I had a talk with Alex. His explanation for not telling me when she asked to stay was that he knew I'd probably say no, and I let him know he was correct. She managed to get 2 years of free child support when both he and his brother were living with me full-time, so she's gotten enough help from me. Since he broke the rules and my trust, I told him with 2 working adults in the house, there's nothing stopping them from paying all of their own utilities, and they could pay the yearly property tax in lieu of rent, $3,600, versus the lowest rent for a 2-bedroom being $900 a month. I told him I expect them to take over utilities in the following billing cycle and figure it out among themselves and what bills were going to be in whose name. Alex has been calling and texting to get me to reconsider. He's gone to his grandparents as well, who have been on my case that I can't do that to Alex because it would cut into time he could dedicate to his studies, and he's just trying to help his mother out, which I should be doing instead since she's the mother of my kids. I merely think of this as a consequence of his actions. Edit to add, thanks for the feedback. I won't be selling the house. I plan on living in that house. I spoke with my lawyer and have an agreement being drawn up. The ex-wife is being given an eviction notice with 30 days to leave. She's gone one way or another, but my son will have the option of either signing and staying or going with her. Not the jerk. Your ex-wife, on the other hand, is a huge jerk for taking advantage of you and your son like that. Opie, I suggest you call your son again, meet somewhere, and have a heart-to-heart discussion about all of this. Your wife is manipulating your son, and by making them pay for rent, you're portraying yourself as the bad guy in your son's eyes. It was very irresponsible of him to break the rules you gave him, but he's still young, so I suggest you talk to him privately. Explain what he did wrong and work on it. This goes beyond just him breaking the rules and needing to pay for rent. It's the mom manipulating him, and I feel like your relationship with your son might get damaged because of this. Good luck. Well, what do you think? Should OP let his ex live in the house or not? Please let us know.
I'd install cameras around the whole house if I were him, then set off sirens in the house in the middle of the night and get her reaction.
Want to switch sections? Okay. A couple of years ago, I was waiting tables at this restaurant in Jersey. This story took place during our slow season, and it was pretty competitive between all the servers. Every server wanted the better section and the bigger tables since our overall tips were lower than usual. We didn't pool tips. It got pretty cutthroat at times. I was doing okay financially, so I wasn't as money hungry as everyone else. I personally get time anxiety, so I hate being late to things. So if my shift starts at 5, I'm walking into work at 4:45 to get settled, then clocking in at 5 to get to work. My coworker, Kayla, however, had a different attitude. She would walk into work at 5 on the dot and clock in, and then head right to the bathroom to put on her makeup, which took her about 15 minutes. On most days it was slow enough that it wasn't an issue, but it still wasn't right. Call me old-fashioned, but when your shift starts at 5, you should start working at 5 and not apply makeup while on the clock while you have other duties to take care of. I've never had to deal with putting on makeup, but it just seemed to me that she should have taken more time while getting ready to come to work to put it on. I always let it slide because I'm non-confrontational, but it bothered other coworkers. However, management never got around to addressing it. One day, I walked in at my usual time, and as I clocked in at 5, I saw Kayla clock in as well and scurry off to the bathroom. I rolled my eyes and walk over to the host station where there are 2 people waiting. The host asked if Kayla was here yet because she was up for the first table in the rotation. I told her she was getting ready in the bathroom. The host rolled her eyes and went to tell her she was going to get sat. We all knew she was putting on her makeup. We weren't going to hassle her if she was on the toilet. I didn't hear the exact back and forth they had, but it took longer than I had expected. The last thing I heard Kayla say was,
"Just switch my section. I'll take the next one. I don't care."
So the host sauntered back at me with a grin saying, "You're up for this table. Want to help me set it up?" I'm confused. Set it up? It's only 2 people? Oh no, it's a party of 14. This is Mr. Moneybags' niece and nephew. The rest of the family is on their way. For context, Mr. Moneybags, not his real name obviously, but it would have been awesome if it was a very wealthy and well-known man in our area. He made his fortune in landscaping and then moved on to real estate. And believe it or not, he was one of the few affluent people in our area that wasn't an entitled jerk. Me and the host set up the table in record time just as the rest of the party arrived. Everyone began to sit down as I greeted everyone, and just as luck would have it, I gave Mr. Moneybags a handshake as I locked eyes with a dolled-up Kayla as she entered the dining room, and she realized what she had done to herself. The next 2 hours, I waited on my 14-top table as Kayla waited on 2 tops. She actually had a table not tip at all, which is awful and I don't condone, but in this particular situation, oh well. And of course, she kicked herself again when she looked over at my table's check and saw the fat tip I was getting off my big table. Oh well, get ready for work before work, not at work. Am I the jerk for wanting a vegetarian wedding? My girlfriend, Nina, 21, fake name, and I, also 21, are finally getting married this summer. Hooray! This decision has caused a commotion in itself because we are too young. We've known each other since kindergarten. We were high school sweethearts and know exactly what we want to do. One of those things is have a vegetarian wedding reception. Both of us have been vegetarian for years, and it just didn't make sense to serve our guests something we wouldn't eat. My mother, of course, has a problem with this, as her hobby is to criticize me. She thinks that vegetarian food is bland, and we will regret it when our guests go home hungry. She's also been wanting to be more involved in the wedding, even though she hasn't been this involved in my life since I was 4 or 5. Last night it came to my attention that she canceled our catering service and hired a new non-vegetarian one. It blows my mind how she was able to do this. After 2 exhausting calls with catering services, we got ours back. I sent her a message that she just got herself uninvited to the wedding. A moment later, she called me angry and sounded like she was crying, but I hung up after a minute. Nina thinks this is reasonable and that we were generous to even invite her in the first place. But our relatives called either angry or disappointed that I would do this to my mother. But I wouldn't be making this post if my siblings haven't said the same and that I should have made a compromise. So, am I the jerk for wanting this? Edit. My mother isn't paying anything in the wedding except for the gift that she would have brought. 90% of the wedding is paid with me and Nina's savings, and 10% is from our collective siblings, my 2 and her 3. My mother and dad did offer to pay for at least something, but I declined because I'm really proud of me and my fiance for saving enough money for this to be just our day. Not the jerk. It's your wedding. And as to the idea that vegetarian food is bland, pizza is vegetarian, mac and cheese is vegetarian, all desserts are vegetarian. If your mother has genuinely never eaten a meal that didn't have meat in it, she probably has bigger problems in her future than being uninvited from your wedding. Edit. A lot of people in the comment section seem to be having a similar problem. Like, I guess the vegetarian part makes it sound like it's nothing but vegetables, but vegetarian just means no meat. Most foods count as vegetarian, and everyone here probably has at least some days where they're technically being vegetarian. Nobody eats meat all the time. Not the jerk. She went behind your back and canceled your caterer. I would have been pretty upset too. I don't think uninviting her to the wedding is unreasonable. If she's willing to sabotage the wedding and is not happy with how things are going to be at it, she doesn't need to be there. This is your wedding, a day about you and your fiancé, and both of you are vegetarians. Not your mother, not anyone else. There are plenty of vegetarian foods that non-vegetarians eat every day that I'm sure you guys could incorporate into the menu. No one is going to starve. It's not like you're trying to starve people. I'm not sure, but perhaps the relatives didn't understand the context of the situation. Regardless, it's up to you who gets to attend the wedding, what does and doesn't happen at the wedding, etc. If she can't be on board with accepting your plans for your wedding and she's going to make your day about herself, she really doesn't need to be there. Am I the jerk for telling my stepmom to buzz off after she uninvited me to the family vacation? I'm 18, female. Not sure where to begin with this exactly, but when I was 13, my parents separated and my dad remarried someone who we'll call Sarah for clarity. Sarah has never acted like we're family, just roommates. Granted, it's not like I gave her the warmest welcome when she came into my life. I was a teenager and hurting because of the divorce. I often wonder if my attitude, and admittedly, accusations of being my life's downfall created such a divide I'll never be able to heal it. Anyway, as the years have gone by, we, for the most part, stick to ourselves. We chatted out at a family activity like bowling or whatever, but other than that, we don't speak unless she's telling me to do chores. I was getting ready to go to class when my younger stepbrother kept coming and getting in my way. For some reason, the little jerk thinks it's the funniest thing in the world to grab something I need while getting ready and run off with it. This is weirdly routine. I was putting on my shoes, and my little brother walks up to the kitchen table where I am. He grabs my laptop and runs because this sort of thing has happened before I immediately start running after him and yelling about how important my laptop is. When I caught him, I'm almost screaming. I'm tired of him taking my stuff when I need to leave the house. Sarah comes in and starts yelling at me because my brother has tears in his eyes. I try explaining he took my laptop, and Sarah knows he does this and usually takes my side on this. Sarah tells me it's unacceptable to blow up at a 12-year-old, and because I'm upset, I immediately say something close to, "He deserves it." Sarah then tells me that she can't handle having an adult so irresponsible as me around the house acting like this. She says that I can't go on vacation with the rest of the family this year. I blow up even more and tell her to buzz off and that she's never liked me to begin with. Now my dad and stepmom say I can't come on vacation for how I treated my stepmom. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Uninviting you from an entire vacation was really the nuclear option here. From the story you tell, I don't believe you deserve that. I'd be angry too. Not the jerk. I literally lived this life. You're a teenager and she's an adult. Anyone who expects a warm welcome from a teen who just had their life upended by divorce is both an idiot and a jerk. I know how painful this is, and it isn't probably much about Sarah, but more about your dad choosing her side. Your brother needs to grow up. Honestly, at 12, it almost sounds like he has some sort of weird infatuation. He seems too old to play a game like that. Unfortunately, you can't change any of it. Keep your head low, try to avoid major blow-ups, and focus on when you can move out. Apologize to Sarah now, not because you were wrong, but because it's the path of least resistance. Always take the path of least resistance with her. I promise, anything else won't get you what you want and will just be more painful. Trust me. Eventually, make the family you never had. Find an amazing partner and commit. Dig in. Give your kids what you didn't have. Am I the jerk for refusing to take a DNA test to confirm my fiancé and I are not related? So I'm 27, male, and my fiancé, who's 26, female, is adopted. She was adopted at birth and hasn't had any contact with her birth family. She read an article a few months ago about how a married couple who were both adopted found out later that they were biological siblings 6 years into their marriage. Now she's worried that might be us, even though I wasn't adopted. I've explained to her over and over again that my parents have been faithful to each other, so there's no way that we're siblings. She still wants us to get tested in case there's an uncle or other relative of mine that got around. She knows what her mom did for work, and our families lived in the same major city. I think she's being ridiculous. I don't want to waste $200 on us getting tested. I don't want to have my DNA sitting in some database where it can be hacked into. I also don't want my data sitting on a website where anyone connected to my tree can find me. It weirds me out. I told her I wasn't comfortable with her getting tested either because who knows what skeletons her biological family have in the closet. I don't want her to find out that she's related to bad people and then be upset. I also don't want half of my future kids' genetic makeup sitting in some confidential corporate database. I told her all of this, but she still brings it up. I may have crossed a line today when I told her that she was being disrespectful of my family by indicating one of them may have abandoned their kid. She started crying and left. She's not answering any of my phone calls or texts. Her sister is calling me a jerk for saying mean things about her biological family. As far as I'm concerned, they abandoned her, so they don't exist to me, and I don't owe them any respect. On the other hand, they are genetically related to her, so maybe by proxy, I'm calling her a deadbeat too. I still don't want either of us to do the test, but I have a feeling this isn't going to blow over. So, am I the jerk if I continue standing firm and refuse to get tested? You're the jerk. Dude, you could just go to your medical provider, explain the situation, and have them run a comparison. It's really not rocket science, and the results don't need to be sorted or skeletons unearthed, but it is an easy way to get the answer your future wife is after and settling her mind. As to the reasoning for the doc, we are thinking of having kids, and this is a valid concern that we are related. Please have our DNA compared. You're the jerk. I was going with not the jerk until I read your last stanza. That is plain mean, man. You're insulting her birth parents, while even she doesn't know much about them. Her concerns are also quite more severe than yours. How could she be feeling safe and happy with you with questions like this lurking in her head? This will definitely not blow over. You'd be wiser to give in. Yikes. You're the jerk. Not because you don't want to get tested, but because you've said that she shouldn't, and pretty much everything else that came out of your mouth in the process of saying it. Not the jerk. She needs to seek professional help because she's being delusional. My girlfriend changed my last name to hers. Huge mistake. Girlfriend and I are heading to a wedding next month. It's a couple she knows that's getting married. I've met them once or twice. I don't know anyone else at this wedding. The other day, her friend called to check if he should also change my name on the guest plan, at which point she admitted to me that, as a joke, she had RSVP'd my last name as her last name, meaning it would be visible this way to other guests on the name tags on the table, and perhaps on other things. I was immediately upset with her and said that I didn't think it was funny, and she shouldn't have done it. She was indignant and upset, thought it was a funny joke, that I was overreacting, etc. Am I the jerk here? See, I'm aware that it could be funny if, your partner likes those jokes. We joke with each other about taking each other's names when we're married, her joking that I should take hers, etc. But for me, this feels like a big overstep. For one thing, it's childish. I would be embarrassed for her friends and other guests to presume that we're married, only to find out that it's a dumb joke, and also for her friends to think we're not taking their wedding seriously. But also, it feels like a power move. She knows that me taking her name would represent a victory for her, and so the joke feels less playful and more of a competitive jab at my expense. I have to put up with others believing I'm someone who took my wife's name and abandoned my own. No offense to anyone who chooses this, but my name is a part of my identity, and I dislike what being thought to have changed it puts across about me. She grudgingly accepts my point of view, but in general feels more upset at having been told off, and that her naughty, playful side is what people like about her, and that I'm at fault for trying to repress it and being uptight. I just feel it's crossing a boundary. Update. Lots of thoughts here. Feeling blessed for all the balanced and constructive feedback I'm getting. Just to clarify, as I think my word choice has rubbed some people the wrong way, I have absolutely no problem with my girlfriend keeping her name if we get married. Personally, giving up my own name goes against my values. Not because I'm a jerk, but simply because I'm a person who values their identity. My girlfriend knows this and still chose to make our joke public with her friends, whom I don't even know. Okay, have at it. You're the jerk. I have to put up with others believing I'm someone who took my wife's name and abandoned my own? Like women have been expected to do since forever? You're the jerk. Literally no one will care or ask about your last names. Also, you should let her know you expect her to take your last name, but you wouldn't do the same for her. You're the jerk. Normally, I'd say that if someone tells you something they did was a joke in order to blow you off, you should tell them that it wasn't funny and it's not a free pass for their behavior. However, you've admitted this name thing is a running joke between the two of you. She took it a bit further than you'd expected, but your response is disproportionate at best and wildly childish at worst. She took an inside joke the two of you had and goofed with it, and you feel like it's crossing some major boundary? I think your comment about if you were to take her name, it would be a victory for her is pretty telling here. She's been thinking this stuff about your names was a lighthearted joke, and maybe a way to have this conversation with you. You seem to have been acting like it was a joke, covering a thread. The wedding is for people she knows that you're not close with, so your comment about being concerned the couple getting married will think you're not taking their wedding seriously rings pretty hollow and feels like a reaching attempt to justify your discomfort and anger. You need to take a good long look at why this is upsetting you so much, and I think you need to take a moment and consider your expectations for any future spouse you have. Would you be alright if they decided not to abandon their name and identity for yours? Or do you just expect that they would? This whole thing smacks of you being controlling. You're the jerk. Women have dealt with changing their names since time began, but you are offended because it's part of your identity? Yeah, it's always been part of a woman's identity too, but they've always had to change it, and you're upset by a joke where your girlfriend changed yours? Sorry, but this is grossly jerk of you, as well as petty and downright disrespectful to your girlfriend on a human being level. You need to grow up and start seeing women as humans, dude. Just what the heck? Your girlfriend is 100% right that you are oppressing her fun, playful side because your ego was hurt by a thing that all women have dealt with since the beginning of last names. Not the jerk. I know I'll get downvoted to heck for this, but let's reverse the roles and imagine they're going to a wedding where he knows everyone and she doesn't. Opie then pulls the same stunt on his girlfriend by signing her up with his last name. You all know darn good and well that if she were the one posting a Reddit story about how much it upset her, all of you would be in an uproar siding with her and telling her to leave him. I'd be reconsidering this relationship if I were you. This is a major red flag and you deserve so much better. The hypocrisy on this site never ceases to amaze me. But said hypocrisy is honestly a reflection of our society and a great example of why men's mental health is at unprecedented levels of broken. As men, we are no longer respected or appreciated, and people show us zero compassion or understanding. Unless you're some celebrity or high-level executive, in which case people worship the ground you walk on. The rest of us, nobody cares about us, and it hurts. You can only laugh at someone so much until they snap, but at that point, it's too late. Well, who do you think is the jerk? Opie or his girlfriend? Please let us know. My wife's parents insisted I sleep on the couch instead of her room. My wife and I got married last summer. Her family lives across the country from us, so up until this point, I had never actually visited them, but I had met them a handful of times and we've always gotten along fine. They invited us to come visit and stay with them for a few days, and we took them up on the offer. We flew in yesterday and everything went well. Her dad and I watched football while she caught up with her mom and sisters, and then we had a really nice dinner. But things went south at the end of the night when it was made clear that they didn't want me sharing a bed with my wife while in their home, and that they expected me to sleep on the couch. I honestly thought they were joking at first, but they insisted we sleep separately. I had a problem with the implication that I shouldn't be allowed to sleep next to my wife, and I also have a bad back, and the couch did not look the least bit comfortable. They don't have a guest room. After arguing back and forth a bit, I decided to leave and book a hotel. I told my wife she didn't have to come with me. She chose to stay, and I said that I'd come back the next day. I went off to a Marriott about 10 miles away and got a good night's sleep, trying not to let the whole situation bother me. This morning, I called my wife asking when I should come by. She told me her parents want me to apologize for leaving the way I did. I told her that I'm willing to apologize to keep the peace, but they need to acknowledge that it wasn't appropriate to insist I can't share a bed with my own wife. She said she'd talk to them and call me back. About 10 minutes later, I hear back from her, and she tells me that not only will they not apologize for it, they're now insisting I need to come back and stay on the couch for the rest of our visit, and if I don't agree to this, I'm not welcome back in their house. I'm pretty livid at this point. I told her that there's absolutely no chance that I'll do that, and I'm no longer willing to offer any sort of apology. My wife's sisters are now bothering me, saying this is just the way that their parents are, that my wife is very upset, and that I need to just give in and stay on the couch for the rest of the trip before this turns into some sort of a family feud. From my perspective, I don't care what they think, and I'm willing to treat the rest of this trip as a solo vacation, go sightseeing, and meet my wife back at the airport at the end of the week. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Your in-laws are abhorrent hosts. It's their house, their rules, and their rules are stupid. Rather than fighting a pointless battle, you set a clear and valid boundary, and they chose to take offense to it. They want you to stay on their couch because it's a power play. You staying in a hotel takes that power away, and they can't handle it. The fact that your wife doesn't have your back on this one is a giant red flag. Good luck. Not the jerk. You have a wife problem just as much as you have an in-law problem. She should be defending you, not deferring to them. Do not back down on this because they are blatantly disrespecting you and disrespecting your marriage. And if your wife can't support you on this, I'd suggest some marriage counseling when you get home because you're her chosen family now. She needs to act like it. Not the jerk. Tell your wife you're going to book your ticket home for today. Ask if she wants to change her ticket to go home with you or if she wants you to cancel it because she'd rather live with her parents forever. You don't want to follow the engineer's sealed drawing? Okay then. I work for an aluminum awning company. Worked in the warehouse for 8 years and learned the machines, and then I moved into sales for the past 10.5 years. For the longest time, all we required from our customers to quote them was the size of the canopy they needed, if it needed any minimum wind/weight loads for being close to the coast or for being inland, and whether they were going to pull a permit for the job or not. If they needed a permit, we got an out-of-house engineering firm to do a stamped/sealed drawing, and then we'd adjust the material list so that our customer could build the awning according to the drawing. One of my long-term customers recently was purchased by 2 brothers that wanted to try something new. They had worked successfully in the tech sector, created some apps, became wealthy, and decided to buy an aluminum awning company from the owner who was set to retire. At first, they were all right to deal with. They were jerks. They had to be CC'd on every email to and from their own Salesforce and would call to yell at me if I didn't CC back. They asked the same questions 200 times for each job and would tell me, "We are your boss. We pay your bills." Really, major jerks, and my company considered not selling to them due to the time and effort each individual job required to get through. Now we get to where they made the mistake that cost them around $100,000. This awning company did not do residential work at all, but instead did larger commercial jobs. Think of the overhead awnings you'll see at the FedEx or UPS bay doors, or commercial buildings with window awnings and break area awnings. Covered walkways at schools and churches. One of these churches contacted the brothers for a series of walkways that were going to be nearly 2,000 linear feet. Massive job. These were going over sidewalks, between buildings, creating a new drop-off area for the school portion, and smaller awnings for where teachers and parents would sit at the playground. The church wanted it done above board and told my customer, "We need a permit for all of this." So that's what they did. They gave me the information, I got the engineer, they worked out the details, got a price, paid it, and within 3 weeks we had a set of drawings. These drawings included 6x6 extruded aluminum posts, as the awnings were going to be 14 plus feet in the air at some points. These are $700 posts, depending on color and paint. My customer did not like that. Brother P. Hey, about that church job, I need you to switch all the 6x6 posts to 4x4. We're going to save the church some money, and we have an engineer that vouches for the 4-foot posts. Me. Do you have a stamp or a seal for this engineer? I need to quote it according to the drawing, but if you have another one where it was Brother P. Just switch it over. We'll handle it. Cue malicious compliance. They had been annoying and hounding me for this job and many others, so I switched all of the 6x6 posts to 4x4. I sent the quote back with the extra line on it stating, "Material changed from engineer's drawing per customer request," printed out the email, and took it to my boss to check off. She asked me the usual questions and informed me that if we sent this job out, we would not accept any returns since it was a customer's request to change from sealed drawings. I let my customer know all this, they approved, and 2 weeks later the material shipped. Now, little did my customer know, but the head of that country's permitting office was a member of that church. Saw the construction going on over the weekend, and when he finally went back to his office, asked around for the permit for his address. He found it with the attached drawings used to get the permit, and took all of that to the job site. From my understanding, this man went out and measured every single post, spacing, and found that my customer wasn't doing anything to the engineer's drawing. The last I heard, he made them take everything down, refill the holes for the posts they drilled in the wrong places, and basically made them start over. I've never smiled as hard as I did when Brother P called me asking to return the posts and switch out for the 6x6. Unfortunately for him, we don't take back material that's been cut, installed, or has screw holes, and that he signed the quote stating that changes per his request. It took him another month to finish the job, and I only wish I knew if they broke even or not. Am I the jerk for telling my sister-in-law we weren't going to cater to her just because she's pregnant? My sister-in-law is 6 months pregnant and is high risk. Because of that, she's unable to work, so she couldn't keep her apartment. The father isn't in the picture, so she moved in with us. Her and I have never had the best relationship, but I put that aside because my husband wanted to help her. We're not charging her rent or anything, as she has very little money. We're buying all of the groceries, and I do a lot of cooking. Here's where the issue is. We live a pretty healthy lifestyle, and I don't like a lot of junk food in the house, as we want the kids to have healthier options, so I don't buy a ton. We aren't super strict or anything, but we will have a thing of ice cream for a week or so, and then next trip we might get a box of brownie mix or a bag of candy. Sister-in-law has been requesting candy, ice cream, chips, pizza rolls, basically all junk food constantly because she has cravings. Now, we aren't exactly rich, so I don't really want to be spending money on food that no one but her would eat, and I don't want to be dealing with the kids constantly asking why Nan can have ice cream for breakfast or pizza rolls for dinner. She's also been asking me to cook different meals, as certain things make her feel not well. I totally get the nausea, but making meals that both of my kids will eat without complaint is hard enough. Last night, she complained again that I don't keep anything she can eat in the house, didn't want any of the food I made, and later, when we didn't have ice cream, she asked me if I would go get her some from the store or Dairy Queen. I got a little short with her and flat out told her that we're fine helping her, but we aren't her kid's father, and we aren't just going to cater to her because she's knocked up. She cried, husband feels stuck in the middle. Not the jerk. You're going above and beyond by allowing her to live in your home and provide quality shelter and food for her. Cravings are not necessities, they are wants. She's in a situation where, pure and simple, she didn't prepare herself to get all of her wants. Your comment was not out of line. She's not the first pregnant person ever, and her failure to plan is not your problem to solve. Not the jerk. She's living in your house without contributing. She needs to stop being a choosing beggar. Also, just going to be a big meanie and say it. If you cater to her, then that gives her less incentive to start planning how she will manage to eventually get out of your house and on her own 2 feet once the baby is born. You don't want to pay me a few dollars to save thousands? Okay. I used to work for a company about 15 years ago that involved constant travel every month, both domestic and international. We were based in New York, but a lot of people lived all around the US, which worked out since we rarely had to travel to New York if you played your cards right. There were 2 main ways of making this work. You could volunteer for an assignment before your normal rotation started, and they would fly you from your home to the work location. Or if there was work at or near your home location at the start of your rotation, you could just start at home. If you did the second option, they would pay you, at a reduced rate, for the time it would have taken to fly you from New York to your home city where you're now starting your rotation. The travel pay was minimal. It was paid 1 hour for every 3 hours of travel, but it was a win-win. The company saved money on airfare, and you got to start close to home. I was living in Hawaii at the time. There was a lot of work in Hawaii, so I was fully taking advantage of the option to start in Honolulu. Since it was roughly a 10-hour flight from the East Coast to Hawaii, I got paid about 3 hours, and the company didn't have to buy someone's airfare to get there. Win-win. The company could be very petty and aggressive towards its employees at times. It was a really strange company culture. They would fire or suspend people on a whim, along with other questionable practices. For example, I witnessed 2 employees get fired for being in minor fender benders with minimal damage and no injuries. The kicker was they even fired their immediate supervisors over it. It was totally random when they would go off the rails with someone, so everyone walked on eggshells. It was a terrible place to work, and I was trying my best to find another job, but the job market wasn't that great at the time. I was able to avoid the petty drama for the first year and a half that I worked there, but it finally caught up to me. One day I noticed they weren't crediting me with the 1 to 3 travel pay for starting in my home city. Sometimes that happens and you just need to call in to fix it. Up until now, it hasn't been an issue. So I call in to inquire about it, and I'm told that they don't pay travel pay. I remind them of the policy and that I've been using it lately without issue. They transfer me to a manager who tells me that it has never been a policy. I tell this manager that as recently as 2 months ago, I spoke to someone in their department to arrange it, and it wasn't a problem. The manager tells me that they're going to research it and find out who it was and counsel them. At that point, I remembered the person I spoke with 2 months ago was this manager. So I informed them that they were the ones that fixed it last time. Their response was, "Oh, well, we don't do that anymore." I said okay and ended the call. Apparently, I upset them somehow. I have my suspicions of what happened, but whatever. Malicious compliance activated. The next month, and just about every month after that, I volunteered to start early for an assignment in Germany. Now, instead of paying me 3 hours of pay for the flight I don't have to take, they are now paying the pay and airfare to fly someone else to Hawaii while also paying for my business class airfare from Honolulu to Germany, along with the pay for the travel. They're paying several thousands of dollars in airfare to save paying me $100. I kept this up until I was finally able to quit about 6 months later. I got a lot of airline miles out of it as well. They also had a policy where if you were working in a place where they knew you lived or had friends and relatives that you'd stay with, they wouldn't pay you the per diem if you canceled the hotel reservations they had for you. So everyone would just check into the hotel and then go stay at home or with friends or relatives. Now, instead of saving money on the hotel, the company was wasting for the hotel and the per diem. This kind of thinking was common at this company. If they thought you were getting something too good, they would spend all kinds of money to make sure you didn't get anything, even if it didn't cost them anything or if they were saving money in the process. A few years after I left, the company ended up going out of business. No doubt, thanks to their short-sightedness and mismanagement. Am I the jerk for trying to accommodate my coworker's diet? I, 27 female, have been at my current company for about 2 years. I like to cook and bake, and my roommate is obsessively a healthy eater, so I usually have a lot of leftovers and I always bring them to the office. About a year ago, Denzel, 29 male, was hired. He and I hit it off right away, and within a few months, people were joking that he and I were work husband and wife, which I thought was super funny and cute. Denzel is already married, and we have a great chemistry, but nothing has ever happened between us. I wish. At first, Denzel seemed to really like my baked goods, but then I noticed he had stopped eating the snacks I brought. I asked him why, and he said that he and his wife were trying a keto diet. I decided to make some keto snacks so that Denzel could still partake, so I made a batch of keto muffins the next week. Denzel didn't try those either, and when I asked why, he said he was trying to lose some weight. I said he didn't look like he needed to, but that I'd try to make some healthy snacks next time so that he could partake in my food without compromising his diet. He told me I didn't need to make anything special on his account, but I found a recipe for low-calorie keto scones, and I made and brought those in a few days later. I also forwarded him information regarding fitness and calorie counting apps that he could use as a resource. Another coworker, Megan, who's friends with Denzel and his wife outside of work, took me aside and said that I needed to stop pushing food on Denzel, that I was making him uncomfortable, and that it made it look like I was interested in him. She threatened to report me to HR if I didn't stop. I was shocked, and I tried to tell Megan that I was just being nice and trying to accommodate everyone when bringing treats to the office, and Denzel never said anything about being uncomfortable, and reporting me to HR seemed like a huge overreaction on her part. I'm so confused now. Am I the jerk for offering food to coworkers and trying to accommodate Denzel's diet? You're the jerk. Learn to read a room. Denzel is married. Denzel has another woman trying to feed him who does not take no for an answer. He told you to not make him anything special, and you kept at this. When he quit eating your food, you should have taken a hint. I think he called it exactly right. You're parading yourself as potential wife material, and you're a very thin line from being pulled into HR to talk about appropriate work behavior. You weren't bringing leftovers anymore. You were baking for a specific employee and pushing it at him. Alarms are ringing, and you owe Megan a huge thank you for cluing you in before you lost your job. Go look for available males that you do not work with rather than hoping the married coworker decides to cheat. You're the jerk. As soon as you said, "I wish," it was obvious that you would like to have a closer, non-work-related romance with Denzel. It's obvious to him, so he put distance between you, and you ignored the barriers he put up. You aren't trying to accommodate him, you're trying to attract him, and he is A, married, and B, not interested. Back off and respect his wishes that you leave him alone. You are in jeopardy of not only looking pathetic in your workspace, but actually losing your job. He should, and eventually will, report your behavior to HR if you don't stop. If you want to make healthy treats, make them for your roommate. Am I the jerk for telling my friend to stop mimicking my symptoms as her own for her followers? I, 26 female, have been friends for a decade with Janet, who's 24. We had never been super close up until 2020. Janet has always had some sort of disability, the most prominent being an autoimmune disorder that causes chronic pain. Janet is also very prominent on social media and often discusses her disabilities very openly. I am not and haven't really discussed mine in length. Recently, I've been afflicted by really bad pains in my hands due to my job. I expressed how badly things had gotten when I found myself physically incapable of using my left hand for the most basic of tasks, such as picking up a pencil or waving. I told Janet about it, as she is a friend and she was sympathetic. But then, less than 24 hours later, I went onto her social media and I found her crying to her followers about her own chronic hand pain. I was kind of dumbfounded since she had just been with me the day before opening jars and carrying around things with no pain or complaints. I decided to let this go and believe that she may in fact be suffering like I am, because how do I know if she hasn't been dealing with this? But then it started to get weird. Janet started asking me more and more questions. What the pain feels like, how frequently, does it shoot to other places or was it localized, etc. At first, I didn't think anything of it and answered her, only for her to have the same type of pain less than 24 hours later. I was shocked that she would say that she had the same level and type of pain as me, even using the same terminology that I did. I decided to stop answering her questions, and for a couple months, she stuck with what she had already told her following. Until last night. After a few visits with my doctor, my pain is gone, thankfully. The only thing that is gone for good is the grip strength I once had, but I just have to cope with it and manage. Janet called me last night, and I, stupidly, told her that my pain is gone and explained my grip strength issues. Can you guess what happened next? This morning, less than 12 hours later, Janet posted a 20-minute sob fest on social media regarding her grip strength and how she's going to have to cope with it leaving her. I watched as she dramatically let tears fall down her face while discussing how she can't do basic tasks anymore. Frustrated, I texted Janet and told her to stop mimicking my very painful condition and using my symptoms as her own for her following and for her attention. She wrote back that I was a jerk for suggesting that she was doing that, and then ran to her social media to state that a friend thinks she's faking and how hurt she is. At first, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, but after her symptoms mirrored mine so quickly, it was suspicious. Am I the jerk? Edit for clarity. I don't know what kind of autoimmune disorder she has or if that is a contributing factor to her pain. She told me that she has not been tested, but she feels she has one. She just doesn't know which. I didn't ask further questions because it's not my business. I also do not discount any pain she has, as I stated. I first was sympathetic with her because I was not going to assume that she was not experiencing things. However, the only time it was brought up was when I had expressed something about mine to her, either good or bad, and this has gone on since late October, so it's not a snap judgment kind of deal. I can't give her false symptoms or anything like that because she's a compulsive Googler. She Googles everything and will know that symptoms are fake. I've decided that I will not be including her in conversations revolving around my health, whether physical or mental, as I don't want to be used as inspiration for her attention-seeking, as someone mentioned in the comments somewhere else. Thank you all for your comments. It really solidified that I wasn't going crazy. Not the jerk, but consider this. You now know who Janet truly is. What's next is up to you. You could be petty and make up symptoms just to watch her mimic them, or you can just ignore her. She's not going to change. Your power is to change if and how you react and don't react to her. Hope maybe someday you can get your grip strength back, but I'm glad to hear that the pain is gone. Am I the jerk for telling my soon-to-be sister-in-law that I didn't actually want to be in her wedding? My brother is getting married in May. My brother and I aren't super close and haven't been for a long time. I moved to another state over 13 years ago. He's never been here, met my husband, or any of that. I just occasionally see him when I visit my grandma. I have met his fiancée a few times, and she's fine, but we're just very different people with very different lives and priorities. She's great for my brother, he's happy, and I'm happy for them. She's very high maintenance and is all about her dream wedding and being the princess. It's all she talks about and has been since they got engaged. She knew he was going to propose, so she got her hair and makeup done and hired a cameraman for the surprise proposal and has like 4 of the pictures framed in her living room of her looking surprised. Anyways, she excitedly asked me to be a bridesmaid. And while weddings are really not my thing, literally got married in the kitchen by some lady we found on the internet 2 days prior, I said yes because it seemed important to her and I figured it would mean a lot to my brother. So I put on my helpful hat and jumped into the group chats and whatnot. The group chats never stop, like ever. I'm expected to fly down for dress shopping and other important bridesmaids' duties, including rehearsing a flash mob dance. Anyways, I got pregnant, and after everyone found out, sister-in-law called me and told me the bridesmaids' dresses she wanted to use for the wedding were going to be very form-fitting, and I probably wouldn't be comfortable being pregnant and all, and basically let me know I was no longer needed for the wedding party. But great news, I can still help with all the bridesmaids' duties. Now, here's where I may be the jerk. As she was going on about how I would still be an honorary bridesmaid, and I could still help with planning and the showers and the bachelorette party and all that, I cut her off. I was in a bad mood and said, "Look, honestly, I really didn't want to be in the wedding in the first place, so I'm actually relieved I don't have to deal with it anymore." Apparently that upset her and made her cry, which led to an angry call from my brother, who was saying if I don't apologize to her, I'm not invited to the wedding. I'm considering not apologizing and not having to travel to be at the wedding at this point. So, am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Sounds like you were very supportive and then your sister-in-law tossed you aside because you were pregnant. She sounds like a handful and then wants you to do the work anyway. Don't apologize unless she apologizes for treating you poorly because you're pregnant. Well, who do you think is the jerk? Opie or her sister-in-law? Please let us know.
If there's one thing I've learned from all of these stories over the years, it's that weddings just really aren't worth the hassle or the drama.
Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard.
Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.